Hey, good morning. I'm going to be just charting AMC today. We'll take a look at small AMC moves if we need to. It was good, yeah. It was good. It's good to check the bottom again. Um, I'm not convinced, and I know it's going to sound weird, but I'm not convinced that 246 needs to break this time because I've found some evidence that I don't know, it's light evidence, but there's evidence that suggests that the May 5th bottom, which is actually 258, which we're above right now, might be more important than 246. So if that's the case, this could be thought of more as like a triple bottom or like a triple liquidity check, like a sweep. And the 246, if it is a double bottom, which I'm not saying it has to be, I wouldn't be surprised if we drop again. I think it's a good check, but it would not surprise me to see some kind of almost like a double test here, like a double bottom test below the May bottom, which is 258, May 5th. One thing though, like we talked about it yesterday, I know, but we kind of finished the stream on a weird note, and I left it with this information that I was looking at. And when I started charting it today, it really threw me off because I didn't expect it to be like as clean as it was. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a big deal. And I basically just missed it. So we started looking at November stuff on GME. And I was looking at it again, and I was looking at the big wave. So this is really, yeah, I'm not gonna comment on that. I don't have any comments on that. He's not wrong if it's a UTAD, like an upthrust after a distribution, and we need to do another drop because that's the area that we talked about. I don't know if he listens to me or if he's just doing a good job, but I agree with that idea that if you were to go up above 360 and then drop again, you could lose the floor. It could be like a move up before a bigger spring. A lot of it will depend on whether or not, again, the bottom holds, and right now it held. So it's possible that if we're going to break it, we might go up first before down. But I'm not going to go against my own TA here either. And I already drew it out yesterday. So if you looked at the chart yesterday, you would have saw that, yeah, I had a pop to like 350 and then come back down. I mean, that was literally what I drew out yesterday. So I don't know. I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm just saying, like, probably have a similar mindset about what that distribution would look like if it comes up and then drops through. And then $2, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, like I had 178 to 217 to 226. I mean, if you average those, that's $2. So for you guys, if you're just a viewer and you're like listening to different people and they have similar ideas, I mean, it's good to mark off those levels and just think about, like, if I heard that from somebody and I heard it from two different people, and if I trusted those people, I'm not saying you do or don't, but if I trusted those people, I'd probably be like, okay, well, they're both saying that if it goes up above this level and it comes back through the creek, it's going to go low. That's pretty reasonable, and I don't think that's a hard conclusion to draw. So his numbers are pretty similar to mine, and I'm not going to comment on it any further. But that's only in a situation where you get kind of a pump and dump here into November. I really want to just focus on my own stuff, though. And yesterday, again, I kind of talked about this pivot that I found that I can only really say this. It's kind of the last. It really is kind of the last pivot. I don't foresee there being another one because the extension for that, and this was the chart I showed yesterday. I've got a lot of groups right now, which is good because it makes it easy. This was the chart I showed yesterday, and I talked about different kinds of bottoms here and like what it would look like if it went up, I mean, did a pump after earnings and then dropped. And again, that would be like, I don't think you even need to go as high as 3 something, but I think you just have to come up above 290 area, and then you could probably dump it. I mean, you could go up as high as, just to kind of fake out bulls, you could go as high as like the 360 area and then dump it. And certainly that $4 region is super critical for a number of reasons. That's a super, super important top zone. Maybe you could say 370 because that was also used a lot. So again, I'm not in any disagreement with Nick P about that. I don't have any commentary on it. Just yeah, it's kind of similar to what I'd said if it goes up and then dumps. But this is what I had on the chart yesterday, and then we started looking at these November dates. And I just want to point this out because, again, like this idea of going up and then back down, that doesn't really matter to me. It would just be like a fake out. But what's significant is that if you're going for the strength test and you get that strength test and you break above and you hold right here at 320, and this is just a recap from yesterday, then you would be good to go. And I genuinely don't see it being a problem unless you start some kind of a distributive top. But you just have to be aware that that's a possibility. So I don't know. If you followed me for a while, you kind of would already agree that that's pretty much what I've been saying the whole time about like this 360 region. You know, people say that I'm wrong about stuff, or that I get this wrong or whatever, but we haven't even tried that yet. I mean, you can't really say anything until you get there. And this happened maybe one other time that I can remember, maybe two times, and that was kind of right here in July. And I remember, and in June, July, I remember saying that if by like July 10th or thereabouts, that's going to be a problem area, you're going to have a lot of resistance there, and ultimately it needs to jump the creek there, or it's not going to go back up any higher. And it didn't. And that warning just comes as a warning. It's not because I know what's going to happen. And the same warning I applied in December because it needed to make that jump, and it started to. It looked like it was going to go. But as soon as that reverses and comes back through the creek, it's over. I mean, you can hold your breath and try to like wait it out, but there's nothing you can do. If you see that distributive candle and it slides back through the supports, this ain't Tesla, like Tesla has those moves where it just kind of goes bonkers and then it reverses. I don't find that to be very likely on AMC. AMC does follow its own rules quite well, actually. And so there's really no reason to question it. So yeah, if it comes back above here and then it dropped back through 290s, it's done. Like I'm not going to hold my breath for it. I would just pretend it's bearish for the time being and then wait it out and see what happens. And until something else changes, it could have another change, but then that's just another change, right? A big part of charting is understanding just where those levels are, where you're going to run into some issues and you need to know where they are. And that's certainly a zone right here that, I mean, again, I'm trying to not be, I'm trying not to be like defensive, or like in my mind, in my heart, I know that I don't want to sound like I'm trying to like constantly prove myself or something. But it is hard when someone comes to you and they say, well, so-and-so said this. And I'm like thinking to myself, yeah, I mean, I talked about 360 for the last like 2 months. So my understanding of that is just that it's the same problem zone. And that's all there is to it. And I don't have to prove that. I mean, you can go back and if you really wanted to, you can go back and get transcripts or something and look at all the times I've talked about coming up here and possibly dropping. So you got to be careful about that. Anyways, let's move on to something new. So this was piquing my curiosity at close yesterday. And then I kind of ran long and I decided to just stop. It was a 2-hour stream and I didn't really want to keep going. But it was important, and that was this idea that November, these creeks are kind of interesting. I would call them like parallels or really like trends. I don't know if I'd call them a creek, except for more recently where it's really provided an incredible amount of resistance. But I do generally think that's where it is, I got them highlighted in pink. Generally, that's kind of where the resistance has been. So, I mean, you can definitely call it a creek, I suppose, and it's very important. But what's curious about this, there's two things. So, number one, all the November dates are lined up. So those are those 3 different years of November. So we got November of 2023, 2024, and 2025. They're in basically a straight line. Okay? Which means they're basically at that time revisiting and retesting that creek. However, and this is important, this time we're on top of it. We're not below it. So the last 2 times we've been below it. This time we're coming down on top of it. We've actually been above it, and we're coming back down on top of it. Previously, we were below it, and I need you to see that, because if you're like me, in your head that is probably a good sign, or at least it's a better sign, because the previous 2 times that we've approached this of the last couple of years, we've been going at it from a low point, right? And hitting it, like approaching it as if we're going to try to break it, and we fail to break it. In fact, both times, even though they're definitely different, both times we pressed up against it, and then we tried again, and we pushed above it and failed. That happened in November, year over year. So even though those were like really separate, long-winded events, it is the same. This is different because in a lot of ways, this is essentially reversed. You have a new resistance, but that new resistance is basically like the old top. And I don't want to make it too dramatic here, and I don't want to go like crazy on this, but it is different. Like, this is certainly, I wouldn't say backwards, but it's definitely in reverse in terms of like how it's approaching this level. It's built on top of it this time. So if you look at this lower mark, I'm going to bold it as big as I can here. If you look at that lower mark, that's the one that it has tried to breach, and we're on top of that. Okay? You're just throwing out numbers, Alex. I can't answer every question about that, okay? There is certainly a chance it gets above like 1250. We'll get there, but at least for now, like 8s are my target, and then I'm thinking 8 to 7s is probably a healthy target. There's some extended move targets to like 14.5, and this gap fills up here around 13 to like even up to 19, but those are extended. So, I mean, if you're asking if there's a chance, it's never 0%. But it's not where I think the major moves are. I'm not going to be like that guy that says it's going to go to the moon, because I don't necessarily think it does. I mean, the chart has its own information here, and it's given pretty good information. So this S-curve down, it looks like the reverse of what we saw previously. Now, if I'm using the top marker, which, you can barely see right now, but I'll bold it. If I'm using that top marker, technically, like, these two both kind of hit it and then pushed it again. And that's the one that I think maybe you could use as a potential for a spring, believe it or not. Because of where it's positioned on the chart, really, I think that this determines, or could determine, a lot of things. Now, it may look like I fudged it and I'm trying to draw it like the way I want to draw it, but this is honestly what I had on the chart yesterday, and I looked at the extension from the top down on this guy, which was actually more like here. This guy, this little extension on this triangle, and it only really measures out to like 239 to 238, which means it's basically just barely going beneath the bottom. Now, that being said, you can't really see it. The bottom of that triangle is right there, and we just touched it. So, like, yesterday I mentioned that I thought we might go up to like near 265 and then drop. And in extended hours, we actually went pretty high. Went to like 270. And that was before earnings, because I was thinking like this probably would be a good time to have like a final flush. But notice that it's testing that top marker. And then again, remember, in previous times, this was used as a distributive action. You can see like it pushes that, it advances through it and goes away from it. And this has been used 2 Novembers in a row for the same purpose, right? So it's, again, pushing It's exactly the same. Like it's identical. You can see it holds up and then it pushes again away from it and then it drops back through it. And that's the distributive action right there. And in both cases, I know there's distribution there, but in both cases it left a gap. All right. Now, you might be saying, well, how do you know that line is right? I've been using these angles, and there's really one angle that works very, very well for almost everything. And it goes back to almost like really far. It goes back to like 2017 range to 2019 range. And it really starts here. And the drive, if you will, is coming from this position of like, this is essentially like the creek, right? And when it jumped, it's where does it actually break out? It breaks out right here at like 2290. You know, in the past, that's not what it was. You're like, well, that's not really where it broke out. But see, it had the SOS and da-da-da. Yeah, I know. But this angle in particular, it breaks there and it jumps the 180. And I don't actually might be the 200 on the daily. I'm not sure, but it's one of those two. They're very close here. That's where it breaks out. And it is, I think, where the creek is. I think ultimately, like the top here in February 2020 is kind of trying to like redefine it. But you might say like, that doesn't make sense. It looks messy. I don't really care. Okay. At this point, I've got too many charts going through my head, but I know that this particular marker comes up a lot. So I've been using these angles already. And then I found them more recently that they really correlate quite nicely. And I talked about that whole thing yesterday. I went through it for like an hour. So this is a big deal. So if you were to look at this and you were to say like, how would this look in reverse? Okay. Forget the idea of doing a UTAD here. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Yeah, it's possible. All right. But forget that idea for right now. What would this look like? It would reject here. It would probably come below 246. It might hit 239 or 240 first, then hit 236, and then it would push down low. Now, this number that I've got on the chart, you guys, I can't make this crap up. I really can't. And if you think that I'm just doing this because I'm biased, like, I don't know what to tell you. But I did not plan this. And I'm telling you right now, I don't know if it's going to go beyond this, but right now it's sitting at basically like 225 to 227. And if you don't know about that 226 number, you know that I've been using that for a year now. And I'm very, very much of the opinion that that could indeed be correct for a number of reasons. I don't know for a fact that that's going to be the number, but all I can tell you right now is if it did stop there, I would be like, going crazy. I'd be like, what? What? And what's even more crazy is that number did come up like a long, long time ago. When I was talking about like 250 bottoms and 225 came up quite a bit. I don't want to get into that part. That was way back when we had the combo chart. And that combo chart ended at like 240, and then this ends up dropping down to like 240. It was kind of foretelling the future, but it really did, and it ended the combo chart at $2.40, and then we went to 239 as a bottom, and I thought that was peculiar math, right? So like valuations, this would be the comparable move, I suppose. You know, and it doesn't have to go that far down. I'm just thinking like if it were to go back and check that level, it'd be like 226, which is pretty phenomenal. And I've been saying that for a while just for fun because I was like, well, that would be like me saying that this is worth $1 basically in La La Land. And it is. If you use the shifted chart, if it drops down to like 226, then that's the equivalent of the shifted chart dropping to just above $1. So the variation there, the deviation there would be that it's basically equal parts from $1 as a low for that deviation, and then the high would be, interestingly, coming down to basically this area around 780, or excuse me, around 6 something. It was like right here. It may have been 5, like this top, like 556, but it was really close to that. So it's like a 50-50. Anyways, that's just some fun trivia knowledge right there. The point is that each of these Novembers, it was approaching this from the bottom. It has a clear, like distinct motion of trying to hold the support, doing an up thrust, dumping back through. Now we're approaching it from the top. That is a big deal. I hope you guys can tell when I'm excited about something, but also why that's so important, because it's basically jumped that resistance at this point. However, there was another thought that came to my mind, because this goes back to like where this breakout was, right? And you can kind of take this and run with it and try to play with these parallels and see where that intersects the top. And I did. And I got some interesting numbers. I got a pivot on the 13th. This is important. So if you're a big fan of the chart here and you want to follow along, this is an important note in your brain. November 13th was the intersection that I got with 891. The final intersection, which is kind of the widest that this can go, is February 19th, 2026, which is very close to the next earnings report. February 2026 has largely been where I think that the final big wave is going to end and terminate, based on the timing that I came up with really 2 years ago now, because it was back in 2023 going into 2024, and we're in 2025 going into 2026. And again, I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that because I've never really changed that number. And February 2026, I've kind of repeatedly found that to be a likely wave top for much of the market. It doesn't mean it couldn't go beyond there. It's just that in terms of like bottoms and pivots, that's a really important one. That's like a really important potential pivot right there. So I've been thinking that it might be at a high there, or it might be like at the major pivot there. But that's really what I've been using as kind of a grounding for a lot of my charts, is like, well, that's where it is, you know. And at times I've gotten January, at times I've gotten March, I've gotten May and April sometimes. You know, I think it kind of just slides a little bit because of just where you're measuring from, like middle wise. But it comes from this guy, which it goes pretty far back. I mean, it comes from like over here. This is really like kind of the first, I would say the first major signal was using like this bottom and this top, and then it gives you February. Okay. This is sort of how it starts, because I started with this premise that, well, this is where we broke down. So where do you come back? Basically, like when do you stop? If this is a wave up and then this is a wave down, where do you come back to roost again? And it makes sense, because this is ultimately where it pivots from. Roughly. I mean, you can kind of like fudge it so it pivots like a slightly different place, but it's never going to be like dramatically different, right? It's always going to be like a 6-month window or something. You're adding time or whatever, but then this is where it drops, right? It pivots down. So I'm using like these motions as like a guide and saying, well, where does that ultimately kind of terminate? Now, somebody might look at that and say, well, I think that's completely backwards, right? Because wouldn't that just mean that this is at a low in February? But then I think about the fact that like, well, yeah, that's true. But AMC, once it has hit this pivot, it doesn't take more than a month. Each of these moves is massive, right? You're returning back, and they're huge. They're fast moves. They happen over the course of like a couple weeks. So yeah, like maybe the pivot's early February. It could be possible that that's actually a low point. But ultimately, like my expectation is that if it is a true pivot, that is going to be a reversal. And I don't know exactly, again, where that happens, and that's where we come in with the rest of the chart. But the point being is like that does make sense. So as a wavelength, it wouldn't be unreasonable for someone to say, yeah, I think by the end of February, it's going to be high. Now, that would be very difficult, I think, for me personally, when you get to February 1st, and if it is down low, or if it's not broken out, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at me like, you're crazy, is never going to go in February, right? If by that point, you know, we do hit a high mark here at like 5 or 6, but then we start coming back down. If by that point we're low, I think most people are going to just say that I'm full of crap, right? And I would be like, all right, Well, there's not anything I can do about that because, again, each of these moves is like the blink of an eye when you look at the chart. These are very, 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 very fast markups and markdowns. Extremely fast. So when you look back at these, you're like, yeah, I mean, it took like no time. You think about how much time you're going sideways versus down and up here. It's like incredibly different, right? So I have no no other real thoughts about that other than just to say like February has been the date that I've been looking at as like that's probably where it happens. I don't know for sure, but that's probably where it happens. I'm going to stick with that, and I haven't changed it. There have been, again, other times where maybe I got other dates. I used some other methods to look at like gaps and stuff. All right, so where is this going today? I'm doing too much recap. Well, what I'm trying to say is that like right now, the only two places that I really see this intersecting this particular lower wave here, which is honestly, and it may seem a little odd, but this is basically, and I don't think the angle is the same at all, but this is basically like another version of kind of like the macro wave, if you will. I probably use this bottom. Yeah, it's pretty dang close, actually. That's really close to that pivot right there. So it may be right, because this, I marked it off earlier. I think it's 70 something is where it goes to. It goes to like right here in extended hours. So that's really close to the same angle that I'm using down here. And I've talked about this, and I've talked about this being like a micro iteration. And I'm gonna blow some minds today if you're kind of in doubt of that, because I think it is a micro iteration, and I found further evidence of that today, like extremely good evidence of that today, with this November thing. So this particular, like more solidified evidence than some of the other stuff that I've shown, which is a lot of theory. But yeah, so this is a really solid micro explanation. So if you were expecting this wave to come up here, you could also maybe expect this macro wave at some point to also intersect here. Granted, at this particular rate, it would be difficult to know where that happens. All right, so what's the deal with this November stuff? I'm going to switch to GME for just a second. And I'm going to try to keep this brief because I want to get to like the present tense here because I haven't finished this and I wanted to just chart it live. So one thing really stood out to me on GME was that if you do roughly the November 20th, which is, or that third week in November, third to fourth week in November, around Black Friday or your Thanksgiving holiday coming up. Thanksgiving is always the third Thursday, I think, or is it the fourth Thursday? I don't remember. Fourth Thursday in the month. But anyways, there's a sweet spot here where I've kind of found like the numbers are pretty similar, right? So I've got Monday the 15th, Monday the 14th, Monday the 20th, Monday the 18th, and Monday the 17th. So I kid you not, all right, maybe this is obvious to other people who are just like, no duh, but I did not ever do this like this. So I went back to the November 21st. I marked off these dates. I drew a line through them. They connect. Not only do they connect, but they're very, very close to like opening, closing values on those dates. If not the dates that surround them. The dates that surround them have a lot of continuity with these markers. So this is an angle that's being chosen. It's probably very, very, very similar to one of the major creek angles here. If you look at this guy, you can see like that pushed it out, and then that's where it follows down. So if you're wondering like what parallel is that, where did that come from? I charted it as a trajectory through November dates. But then here's the kicker. All right, there's two kickers here. One, these are actually 50-50. So year over year in November, it's back to 50-50. It's exactly 50-50. It's like half value. So it goes from 52 20. You guys are like, well, yeah, I mean, to 26 to 13 is dividing it in half. So percentage wise, okay? And yeah, I guess numerically, but you might be like, well, those are kind of slightly off, right? Not really, because it's 52 20, 26 10, and then 13. So again, that could be 1305, but whatever. Maybe it's like a penny off or a few pennies off. I don't care at this point. It's just to illustrate like they are indeed 50-50, okay? What's crazy about it is, and if you look at the next November, and this is crazy, the next November is at the 2610 again. It's in reverse. It actually came back and did a full anchored retrace. Now, part of that could just be the nature of supply demand levels and like knowing that your operators probably saw this as a middle and I guess saw this as a top. You could maybe create a fib channel maybe from here up and down where you have equal distances, and you could probably derive a whole bunch of fun stuff off the middle. This is not new to us. If you've been again on the channel for a while, we've known that this 26 area, and I've said 27, I've said 25, I've said 24, whatever. We've known for a long time that that's likely the middle. In fact, I was doing all of my arcs and curves off this February region, right? Which is right around that mark. So again, if you've been with me for a bit, this is not new that we think this is probably like the center fold for a lot of this information. It also makes sense of a lot of things that happened when you look back at this drop down here and kind of defining the range, and then where we come back up right here, that is indeed going through that November bracket. So if you're looking at that top from, and you could probably not see it very well on the chart here, but if you look at that top from May, you can see that that's like the 62 area or 60 area. That actually goes right through that November date as well. These are wavelengths. So this starts looking like a really boxy structure, right? When you start looking at these curves, why would I use that bottom and go through that, right, to determine where the top is? Because wave principle would determine that if that's one wave, it should come back, right, to that same point approximately at that time. And if you did it right, it would work, and that's what we have. We have an effective wave. So this is just sine wave methodology, okay? Pretty straightforward, and it works when it works. I say that because sometimes you think you have it right, and you don't have it right, and that's all there is to it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you think you got everything you need, and you're off by a couple months or something. It's like, okay, well, there it is, right? I don't find this kind of math to be inconsistent. I don't find it to be unuseful going forward. So just because we're looking at retrospect does not mean that I think it's not useful going forward. In fact, I've been doing the same thing in looking at this stuff right here and trying to determine maybe where it goes in the future, and this being a wave. So just like we had a macro push here, I've been talking about things in terms of iterations, and you guys know I use that word a lot. And iterations is just another word that's part of the fractal definition, which is that it's creating a behavior pattern that you can see inside of itself. It's like the idea that the snowflake pattern is made up of the same snowflake patterns inside. It's kind of a cool phenomenon. We see it in the market because market behavior on the small reflects what's going on in the big picture. But in theory, this should work because, again, it's worked before. It doesn't have to be perfect, you know. Again, to be like blunt about it, you could be a little bit off, and I think you'd be okay. You know, this case, you can tell like it's building out similar but not the same. I mean, this looks almost identical if you look at that wave down. I used a different marker here, but you can see that's the same marker down here that we have here. All right, so the same angle. If you want me to use that, I will. Let's do that. That's the same angle. Oh, it's going to drop then. Maybe, but if it reverses back above it, you've got a good chance, really good chance, okay? Could also be that, again, we've already kind of experienced some of this stuff, and we are going to drop, and maybe I've got this in the wrong spot, so on and so forth, okay? I don't really want to get into like that right now. I haven't gotten that far. But my point was in showing you this was that like this is consistent right here because it's built out a range around a middle. This likewise should be consistent, even though, yeah, it goes over the top in the beginning. You're like, well, it will never come back up again. No, it's a retrace. And this is just a basic way of looking at a potential retracement, right, from this top move down. So it's a bearish retrace that's retesting also the liquidity. So what's left? What have we not checked? Well, this is what's weird, all right? Because I was like, all right, you have clear evidence that this was trying to get back up to maybe near this November top. We do have a weird kind of like a missed opportunity. We never check the actual number, which is 52.20. And I find that to be kind of curious. We didn't check that number. We kind of moved around it. And so we do have this high check early in extended hours, and then it drops low. It opens very close to this top from November 4th. When we come back up, we hit 47. We never got to, and you can see like in relative time, like we never got really back up to that kind of middle area where this marker actually is on that November 15th date. So when I did the numbers here, what I determined was that, well, in theory, though I don't necessarily believe this is going to be exactly what it is, in theory, this should be somewhat accurate then to say that this should be coming back up towards, at some point, in the future, should be coming back up towards that. And I'm kind of fudging the way I'm doing this chart because I don't really need it to go through November. But it would be sensible, right, if it came back up and hit that mark. Where else could it be in November? Well, it could be at a low. Sometimes we're at a pivot point when we see those indications because we have two possibilities here. This goes back a long ways because I had looked at this previously, and I know you guys probably remember this really messy chart that I did with all these waves and junk, and I said like right here could be the middle of like a cat ear, right? And the problem with the cat ear is that the cat ear presents you with like two opportunities, right? One opportunity to go high and one opportunity to go low. And you can see now, like looking back at it, I think we were right because it's developing a level right here around the 32, which is what they used for that warrant. But look at the separation between the 32 mark. Again, approximately, going down to like 19 to 18, which is that retracement, versus going up to 52. It's generating like a middle channel. Okay, that cat ear is always kind of an indeterminate period, which is frustrating. I get that, but I think we were right. I think the problem was that the markers that I used were way too early. Okay, they were just too early, and I didn't use the right ones over here. I talked about that earlier. That's just live and learn kind of stuff. I can't really fix it now. There's nothing I can do about it. Right? It's in the past. But the nature of this as a potential walk back up is certainly there. Now, you might say, well, this one goes like way beyond that top, right? So if it was only intending to go there, does it really go further? I don't know, but they opened it at that line. Like they didn't, if you knew where that line was exactly, you kind of would have maybe known where that was going to open. In our present time, we don't really know. Like we don't have 100% certainty of where that mark is because Booksy's an idiot and he can't figure out where the middle is. It's either the 7th of February or like the 20-something of February. I cannot tell you which one is more likely. There is a nice wave. If you look at these two tops, there's a nice wave that kind of goes through both, and that would indicate that like December at 71 or something like that. Maybe that's like near the middle. If you're wondering about this as a sort of a principled backup, there's another thing that's worthy to be concerned about, which is, again, where is the middle, right, would determine time. Another thing that you'd have to be concerned about is the fact that this doesn't actually go from the bottom. This goes from that backup. So this is very different from like what our expectations would be if that's the case, because this would not go through, and you guys are like, well, this is going to be really low, isn't it? Yeah, to an extent, but hear me out, okay? Because if this goes through the middle, then in reality, like, you're kind of wondering, well, that's not really good, right? That would end up being like really low potentially if that's the middle. Well, you're right. And this is where I was getting the 44 to 46 numbers from, because I was using this as the middle, and I really had no way to know for sure, but it looked like October. And again, maybe at latest November 13th or thereabouts, which is the same number that we got for AMC. But it wouldn't be that high. It would really only go up to maybe 44. So if you've been following again on GME, you probably remember that number was one that I had used quite a bit. And it wasn't like this super high, like 60, 70, 80 number. It was instead 44 to 46. And I've gotten that frequently. I don't find that to be, again, inconsistent, nor do I find my analysis here to be lacking in that regard. I just kind of think that's the low end. So I haven't really thought much about it except just to say, yeah, it's probably not going to go way beyond here. But the more I started looking at this chart, I was like, they left that on the table, and that is the November date on the 17th. And it's possible, given that we have an earnings report on the 3rd, that this is the kind of a sell the news moment. It's not impossible that this is actually up high at that time or very close to it. And if you had like a melt up moment here and then you kind of came back down and up again, I don't think I'd be very surprised if it hit 52 on an open and then came all the way back up, maybe even on earnings, who knows, on the same way that we did over here where it has like a second wind. And that is actually the 44 high. That would not surprise me. This would be fairly consistent with what our expectations would be here because, again, notice that the backup here goes back towards the last major sort of supply point. And we would probably look at this and say that makes sense if it came back to like that 26 to 28 area as a backup and then moved again and potentially, I'm not saying it will or won't for sure happen, but by the 3rd come back up to like 44, which might be why we're getting like variable numbers here. And I can't quite pinpoint because there's kind of a breadth of movement here. Maybe I can't quite pinpoint where it's going to come back up because there's 2 different runs potentially. Just like here, this doesn't really, I don't think necessarily pinpoints it very well. Okay. So all that being said, 52 is looking more and more like a possibility. And again, this was really interesting to me. So just to repeat one more time, this is a phenomenon, I don't know what else to call it, where you're basically going in like a straight line. And yeah, I mean, and this kind of gives it even more context right there. This right there is really strong. Again, getting over 30, that's the breakout zone. Would get you from 30 up to 52 and then back down. It's just this window right here. And I'm looking at this like as objectively as I can, and I'm trying to determine if it makes sense that AMC would do something similar. But hear me out, because this is where things get kind of spicy. And I found something that I was not prepared for. I looked at this and I thought, okay, well, 2021, surely AMC doesn't also do a 50-50 down into 2023. And I went and I looked at it and I was like, it couldn't have, because there was a giant split, right? There couldn't have been like this perfect 50-50. They don't follow the same path because AMC dropped so far. And I was wrong. They do follow the same path. I can't even believe it, to be honest. Not only is this November date kind of in the middle of where I thought that cross was, which you can see right here, which is fine. I mean, that's all good news. I mean, that's a good sign that it's really close to there, because that's like a halfway point. November 17th, roughly, that region, it's all choppy right here. You can pick any November date, really. The whole month of November, it's basically chopping along that same marker. To the earnings here on this bottom, right, which is like November 8th again, to the earnings here on this November 8th, where it gaps down, that's a straight line. Now, you can kind of fudge it if you really want to, and you can kind of put this like a little bit higher. It makes no difference. It's still in the same zone. And not only that, but these are indeed halfway points. So I was wrong that this would not be possible. At first glance, I was like, no way, it can't possibly be halfway. That implies that they already knew they were going to take it down this low, like back to below the floor. Does it not? Yeah, somebody always knows, right? That is a 50-50 marker right there for this drop down. And the plot's going to thicken. the plot's going to thicken from there because I thought, well, that might be so, but then what the heck happens after? Because on GME, it goes up again, right? It seems to be a perfect wave, like it really is. This is actually, I forgot to mention this, but this is actually the opposite. So this is a 32.8 degree drop. This is a 32.9 degree rise. It's like slightly different based on the way I anchored them. That is extremely similar. The in and out trajectory here is basically the same. Well, that's not the case on AMC. We sure as heck know that. So what's happening? And intro the idea of iteration. So here's where things get, again, very spicy. If you look at where that is around the 9th and the 10th here, and you look at where this is around the 9th and the 10th here, and you look at where we are now going into the 9th or 10th, we are indeed halfway. We are indeed looking at a 50-50 drop down. And I almost couldn't believe my eyes because at first I was thinking like, well, that's not good. Does that mean we're going to do another iteration low? It's possible. And that's what we talked about with the potential, not necessarily the guarantee, but the potential that this goes down again into January was like I had drawn it out. It's basically just a micro iteration. So wait a minute. You're saying that this is like a mini version of this big picture? Yeah. And I don't know if that should surprise anybody. It should not, because once this drops down, it's starting over again. And it really doesn't make sense why it wouldn't be. Now, there's more to it than that. We could go into like further details about that. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, but this comes after this big peak right here. I know. And technically speaking, if you look at the peak, where do we see there being some like drop in consolidation? Really around the 8.5 area. We've been talking about the $8 region. It's that middle right here. That's still the same zone on that peak. So there was not much consolidation there before big drops, but sure. If it's a hyper compressed version of this right there, then sure, it could still be right there. And I don't really care because November to November, it is 50-50, which is kind of incredible. So what, Booksy, you were right about iterations maybe. This doesn't prove much of anything. All it means is that we could keep going, right? Well, yes and no. So this in and of itself does not give you the future, okay? Because what it means to me anyways is that, and this is going to be, again, tooting my own horn, but is that this concept of like, that's the pattern, that's probably right, and that indeed they are using the same pattern, and it is visibly mathematically solid that they're doing that. However, this doesn't necessarily inform like what we would say is like a macro wave here. And what we talked about before was this motion, and then how that relates to what we would expect possibly as a lower motion. So this is indeed, I believe, without a shadow of a doubt, this is indeed iterative. An iterative motion. It's doing the same things, okay? I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that it's doing the same things. However, maybe a way to have drawn this slightly differently, albeit it would be a bit confusing, would be to use something like this over time, you know, and look at like breakdown levels and really consider like this to this to this and then this to this to this. That would be probably a more similar way to draw out those iterative functions. You'd still get the 50-50, right? As you can see, it's a little visually different, but it's still there. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah, but this dropped way below. Does that mean we're going to have to drop below? Maybe. This is where the things that we talked about previously come into play, because once you get to this point, it's like, all right, so for whatever reason, they use November as an anchor to 50-50 down. For whatever reason, while GME in the recent time has come back up to the previous 50, and maybe it's going to stay flat, maybe it's going to go down, who knows? It's definitely time in November to make a decision. We just did a chart on AMC that talked about the 13th because it's really the last major pivot I have before like February. Everything else is just, it's just an enigma. It's like a cloud. I couldn't really tell you. There seems to be a fuzzy area between mid-November, which is really again the final pivot. And I talked about October really being where most of those pivots were anyways. They were potential for spring downs, things like that. I don't really see a lot of beyond that. I can't really see it. The inversion, I suppose, would be possible, but it still would mean you're not going to go anywhere until January, so who cares, right? Or February. So I'm like, to me, it's like, yeah, this pivot represents something, and it's clearly important to the operators who have been using November. Well, one other thing that we looked at right at the close yesterday was this this 4-year cycle. Now, I'm not a big fan of that idea. I mean, I get the idea like a 4-year cycle with elections, but these don't even really run on election years. They're kind of the year after elections, right? So maybe there's something to that, and I need to like back it up or something, but like I'm just specifically looking at elections. And then this chart is what I've been working on today. And again, it's kind of blowing my mind because what I did is I went back to 2017. So first, you need to understand why I picked that number. I picked that because the first one that I wanted to kind of anchor to was here. Now, that's not just because we're running into it now, although certainly that could maybe be a little bit of bias on my part, but it's also because that is where the top was here. And I would look at that as a wave pivot, like it's going back down. Okay, it's starting the drop, if you will. I also look at that because previous to that, it's in an uptrend. Then we have the 3 consecutive 1, 2, 3 division by 2 in a downtrend. So again, I'm picking this because I think it's like a wavelength here down. That's why I'm picking that as a top. I think that November 2021, ironically, is when I started doing AMC charting. That November 2021 is probably that peak of a wave, which we've already kind of established that that's likely, or at least it's close to it, right? We see the head and shoulder almost as it comes down here. Definitely looks like it. But why go back to 2017? I don't really know if it was like a hunch or a gut feeling, but when I did this previously, and again, perhaps you could even go back to November of 2016 and try it. I haven't done that yet. Maybe there's even better numbers there. But I had done some research when we were going up about when we were going up back here and like what was the 13F filings for the operators at that time. And the earliest that I could find was here. And I think that most of your operators that took it down and then back up again, they started it here. It makes a lot of sense when you see it in this context because this is a 50-50 move, right? We already know that around this anchor. This is not, I don't know what, if people think that this is like not TA or something, like you can't use TA on AMC. I don't know where people get that idea from. I have no idea. This is clearly anchored on the support from 2017. Beyond a shadow of a doubt is anchored there. It's a 65.59 now. It's where it breaks out and takes off. I don't know what everyone else is thinking about this chart, but that that angle right there that you see from bottom to top and from bottom to top generates this pitch fan, and it is perfect. It is a perfect pitch fan. It goes from this orange marker, which is the 175, to the 175 on the opposite side. It's a perfect 175 around 175 Fibonacci around, again, from a 4-year cycle point of view. And if you look at where the breakout is, it's right here, right? We've already pointed this out. That red marker is the 1 extension on the fib. And then the breakdown here is on the 1 extension on the fib, the opposite side. Now, I get that this, again, is retrospective. So what I did is I looked at that and I said, all right, well, let me consider what happens when it drops, because I knew back here there was a possibility that that wave reversed the other way. It was a pivot. It's like the middle of a cat here, right? It could have gone the other way, and it didn't. So does it have an equal parts move? The answer is yes. And this is where I'm like, okay, hold the phone. is the reason that we went up here and made the marks that we made because we were already generating like a 50-50. We already knew that that was a kind of a 50. Oh, I did anyways. I've charted it before. This 1380 was important because it's like a 50-50 marker from this top of the range here near 70s, where that is. And that, I thought about that before and I was like, yeah, I mean, it's there, but I just figured they used that because that was the logical move to get that shift value. We've seen that previously. That is indeed the same move as this was made. Like, I don't know how you do it percentage wise with a drop versus like a rise, but it is indeed the same move. So I'm trying to tell you that, like, if you looked at this on a linear chart, it may not look at all the same. I'm not positive. It might not. But I'm telling you, like, here on a logarithmic chart with the percentage moves, like, that's the same, okay? It is identical. So the path moved away from this marker. I want to be not vague here. I'm trying to be as clear as I possibly can. But what I'm trying to tell you is that, and it's going to sound, again, super arrogant, but what I'm trying to tell you is that I was right. But I mean in the best possible way. Because there's going to be folks that are always going to come and say, you're not right about anything, right? That happened like the other day. And I'm like, being right's not the most important thing. Really, the most important thing is it is important, but it's like, if I'm right 73% of the time on average when I'm day trading, that's pretty darn good. And that's what I've been hitting for the most part. I took a little break this week. I'm not really trading very much. But for the most part, like, it's been very, very consistent. So I don't know, like, this idea that you have to be right 100% of the time is just silly to me. But it's more about the conceptual nature of what's going on here. And this would be seen as like a massive hook, right? In a normal circumstance, this would have been seen as like a massive hook, right? That then is followed by a distributive action to the downside. This particular wave right here is super significant then. And I had been using this, and I knew this was probably true, but I've been using this as a way of understanding where that wave might come back to later. Okay? What is profound about it is that the move away from this hook is the same as the move to the upside. It is the same. It's like a reset, but it resets off the middle, specifically around 65, 69. That is very important. I took the angle as well, and the angle does match. The two tops here, the ones that almost double top, there's one at 72 here on February the 20th, 2023. There's another one in September 2023. Those two tops are roughly equivalent in terms of distance. Actually, they are equivalent in terms of distance. I'm sorry, because I copied this. And there's another one like here that's like slightly early. I should say that though. But basically, like, this is almost equivalent. I shouldn't have said they are, definitely. They're pretty darn close. So the point is like, that is the same angle. That's all I was trying to get at. This particular angle from the bottom in April of 2020 to the top, that's the same as the fib pitch fan here to the top in 2021. It's the same angle, but it's in reverse. It really is a reverse squeeze. And I said that as much, and I've had people come on this channel and say, when are the shorts going to cover? And I'm like, guys, I think that ship has sailed. I don't think this is the same play. I think it's an operator play now because retail is still in it. And I do think if there's enough buyers, it will be marked back up to certain levels. But on the whole, like, this was an inverted squeeze. This is the same move that happened in the beginning, but it happened down. If that doesn't put it into context, like, I don't know what will. And not only that, but we anchored around the previous bottom. So we really did like mark down like a 50% here. If you divide this into 4 parts, you'd see it really clearly. And I've been talking about, to some extent, some of these things for a while, and like how I don't think we're going to go back up maybe ever again to all-time highs. I just don't see it. So some people will say, like, they think that we're going to go to like 20 something hundred because they see this widening and they're like, well, why couldn't we? We could just do this and go all the way back up, right? Yeah, but like from a liquidity standpoint, this ship has sailed. Like this is beyond. I'm sorry, I'm using the tops there. I should use the tops here. This is beyond the scope of a single person to be able to tell. Like, there's just no way. Anyone can look at this and know for sure, like, oh, it's going to go way back up there. Anyone that says stuff like that, they're just talking out of they're just blowing smoke basically out their butt. Because, like, there's no way. There's just no way. There's no way anybody could possibly know that it's going to break through all of these levels in the future. And also, the waves don't really support it. Because when this shifted down, and I think it still did, it would be really silly to look at this and look backwards at this and say, like, well, that is clearly going to do the same thing as it did over there and go all the way up. But it wouldn't do that. Does that make sense? Like, even if it did the same thing, it would never go beyond this, like, 70 level, in theory. What makes matters, I would say, almost worse, potentially here, is that, remember that angle we were talking about? So I use the November dates, and I use that same angle. So before you kind of like question where'd you get this white line from, so again, this is just showing you like up, equidistant, reset here, down, equidistant. It's an inverted squeeze, basically, okay? Very different from GME. And remember, I was tracking these November dates thinking like there might be some continuity there, and there is, but they're not continuous in the same way. There's continuity in the 50-50 down. There's continuity in the 50-50 down. We are landing on top, I think, of this November date instead of coming below it. That's a significant point of interest. This paints a very different picture, though, because it really shows that the goal here, if you look at these red markers, and I had them, again, I'm using a fib pitch fan here. I talked about this a minute ago, but these red markers are really where the consolidation is happening and the breakouts are happening. We're on one right now. We've been on one for a long time, like right here. Like, it's the same marker, and it cuts right through it, and the current breakout for that is just like what you'd expect. It's 320, at least for now. Like, assuming you got away from it, you broke out here and you held 290, you're going to go right off 320. What's crazy is that this particular angle, right, the one that I was using earlier to talk about those November dates, this particular angle for these November dates is really identical. It's the same angle that we were using on these other markup periods. And I was talking about it just a minute ago because we had the other chart open. But it goes back to this concept of like creeks and all this junk. You can see that this is like the middle right here. And that's the same angle that I'm using for these November to November to November dates. They're in a line. This is the exact same, but it goes to 2020. The reason I did this, and it's a little odd, I know. The reason I did this, though, is because if you go back and you look at, I was like, I have to try it, okay? And it works, and that's great. But the reason I did that is if you look at this top and how it develops, this is just the angle that's being used. This is an old angle. This is not brand new. This is one that's probably been employed since the beginning, all right? We just use it every now and then, and we don't always pay attention to it, but it's the right one. There's an established trend that's built out right here, and then ever since then, it's just like what we see now in these November push-ups. You get a little support, and then you drop it. Here, right here at the very end, I'm going to get rid of this red box. You get a little bit of support on it, and then you drop it. It's the last point of support here before you come down. There's a little small smidgen of a resistance, and then it dumps, and it really dumps. If you look at GME, although it's different in a lot of ways, this is distinctly different. I might be a little off with this whole idea that it's just retracing sideways, but as far as I can tell, that's fairly close to what we would expect to see here, because at least for what I can tell, GME, although it's following a different path, this is the same little ledge right here. This is the same little ledge that's developed, and then that's the sell-off level right there. This is the same exact mark. I'm trying to make a point here because even though it's not horizontal on AMC, it's the same directionally interaction going into November. So again, this is June to July 1st. It's like kind of the later part of June going into the July 1st period. And then you look at GameStop, this is the later part of June going into July. It's the same ledge. And we returned to that ledge in November 2021, and there's a final little gap down right here, November 26th, going into that Monday the 29th, and then it drops. That's the same thing we see here. You look at November 29th right there, that's the Monday, right? The Monday drop, okay, right through here. I might be like slightly off here and there. I don't know yet, okay? If I'm slightly off, we'll find out. But here's what's most curious about this marker and why I think it's super significant. A, when you use that directional motion, all right, and I created like a second line because there's like a second set of peaks here. When you use that directional motion, just like with GME, you don't necessarily find that these repeat on GameStop. GameStop doesn't come back at completely to those levels. It's a little bit low. And that's why I was saying, like, it might be possible that this is, like, slightly off. Like, just slightly. It's not actually horizontal. I haven't tested that idea yet. But, like, you can see right here, it could be that it's slightly off. But the point is that these two upthrusts do come back into that range. And, I mean, again, maybe this needs to be drawn with a little bit more... like a little bit lower at like 49 or something. I don't know. But you get the idea. They both actually interact with the same marker, but AMC is like tilted. That's important because remember, we're trying to track these November dates and they're consistent going down, but then they stop being consistent over here on the second part. GME looks like it's coming back up. AMC doesn't look like it's coming back up. It doesn't. But the angle changed. Because they're going down an extremely steep angle here, and then it changes to a less steep angle, right, into this lower portion. And this lower portion, as we can see on the Fibonacci's, is wrapping around what was a bottom here structure. We're in a top structure here. It's an inversion. And I've also been saying that I think, again, yes, this is crappy, but this is the bottom of a wave. And yeah, no, most of you guys are on board with that at this point. I believe you are. I think that there's a lot of people out there who are not. Like, I still hear it every other day on here. Like, someone will come on and be like, this thing never is going to go back up. And I'm like, well, it may not go back to 600, or whatever it is, 400. But in my opinion, like, I don't see this as a likely just a continuation indefinitely down. I do see it as a bottom. I think this gives it credibility. This does not mean that it couldn't have more downside. And that's different. It does not mean that this couldn't have like a run that's later in the year, maybe in January, and it's sitting at $1.78. That's not what we're saying. Because in theory, yeah, that could totally happen. And I believe that it could happen, But what we are saying is that, well, it is consistent, to say the least. It is consistent. And if you look at this motion right here and how it's interacting with this red line, it's almost exactly the same. Almost exactly the same. It's just missing what we would call a spring. That's all that's missing. We might get it. We're really in a sell down period right now. And I talked about that too with the on balance volume, because the on balance volume is in a channel and it's coming to the bottom of that channel. And if it's like 2021, it might dip that channel a little bit, but once it reverses, it's done. There's going to be a lot of people out there who are thinking this thing is never going to go again and it's going to run. Now, how high does it go? This is the kicker. So again, the final kind of portion of this is where I'm at right now. We're in the present tense. I'm talking for an hour, but I'm trying to catch you guys up. So I was like, all right, so this marker looks pretty darn good. It does match up with what we see on GME. There is this kind of a nasty 50-50 sell down, just like on GameStop, which also has a 50-50 sell down, but it's way less severe on GameStop. In theory, percentage-wise, it's actually the same. But because of Ape, I think, and the dilution and junk, AMC shareholders got hit really hard with value wise. Value wise, I think our accounts got blown up the bad way. I think for GameStop, it's probably been a little bit easier to stomach it because there haven't been, even though there was like one split here and some dilutive efforts more recently, it really feels like, I guess your account would probably be a little bit more intact just on the whole. Man, our accounts got wrecked, and a lot of people got really wrecked by the Ape contracts and all that junk too. So there's more to the story. But the underlying principle of like year over year, November 21, November 22, November 23 being a 50-50 drop is indeed true. Okay, so I don't want to have to keep repeating this, but like AMC and GME are definitely in sync in this way. But AMC is coming down. I'm trying to repeat that over and over again. I know. We have people that duck in and out of streams. So I'm just trying to repeat the same facts so we make sure we're in agreement there and we understand where I'm coming from. So this is the middle marker, and it goes through, I guess, I mean, I just drew it on the chart. It goes through where we hooked here, and look at where it is now. It's like right above us. It's so close. I mean, so close. If you look at the previous marker here, again, 50-50 on an angle, instead of using like a, instead of using like the sort of the sideways action, which I'm trying to do on GME and thinking might work out, and it might go back up to 52, I'm trying to use the downward angle, but that would imply that we really don't go beyond this marker necessarily, like this top of the channel. Because if GME only goes, let's say it hits 52.20 or 51 or something like that, and then it comes back down underneath 45, and that's it for now, it doesn't go further, then there's not really any evidence to suggest that AMC would go beyond this top coming down, if that's the same equivalent top. And I think it is. I do. There's no evidence to suggest that AMC would do that. We have plenty of evidence to suggest it would go up. We have plenty of evidence to suggest it could go up, and that it's very likely going to be pretty darn soon, by February 2026, and that there's some pretty key metrics coming through the pipeline here on November 13th. We've already established the November. We've done that like a bajillion times on this stream already. So we know that like upside is likely. We know that this is obviously some kind of a wave bottom. It's not 100% a wave bottom, but it's much more likely a bottom than it is a top. And it is more consistently as a bottom than it is as a top, for sure. Like meaning like, oh, it's going to drop further. I don't think so. Like not the way this is built. It's already done the drop, right? It's already had the wave down. So you might be thinking, well, does that mean we're just going to get a wave back up, right? And that at some point, we're just going to go right back up to where we were. Everybody's happy. We're back at like $72. Look, I'm not going to put it past the operator to play head games with people and drive the price from like $1.90 or $1.78 all the way up to 65. And it'd be very similar to what we saw, previously. I'm not going to say that that's not possible. It sure could be possible that there's going to be some kind of head games played there, and you're going to have a hit on like 178, 179, and then it's going to go to $52, and hit this top from way back when on the Judge Zern decision. It wouldn't surprise me. It doesn't look bad. It looks kind of right. If you look at that as a 50-50, it would be 178 and then all the way back up. And I suppose timing-wise, this is a little trickier to do, but it's basically a half length from here, which is really fast. And I don't know if that's an accurate way to do it now, because this looks a lot slower to me. Yeah, because it would be like needing to leave pretty much now. But it would assume that you're going to get up there before June. That's the way it looks on the chart anyways. So you would leave like here. That's very fast. But that's just the way it is on this one. I'm just telling you, like, if it's the same thing, that makes sense. And the halfway point would be right here around 15, which is close to this previous, but a little bit below top. So on and so forth, right? And you would probably come back up to this top right here or close to it, so on and so forth, okay? However, in the meantime, if you're just looking at this as, all right, we've got a spring, we're going to move. Let's say we're going to exit this lower range. Maybe it happens now. Maybe it's a little bit later, closer to January. It's a January run up. GME could go both ways as well. GME could go now on this pivot. It could also be that this is like a low. It hits like 19 and then it chops out and starts building out into January. GME has a tendency to kind of run ahead of the crowd. So it could already be up here and like moving out in January, and then push. I don't know. All right. All I know is that November, again, here at least is very consistently up. So if I were to look at that, I would say like, well, the likelihood then is that this November, it's in line with itself, but then it should be moving, right, to catch up with GameStop. Right? I mean, isn't that the way that this works? Shouldn't we move to catch up with GameStop? I don't know yet. This is present tense. So I'm like talking now about things that I don't have an answer for just yet. And I was starting to chart this. I know that these angles are right, though, because when I put this down, and you can see it on the 50-50, that marker goes back to the creek. This is the established creek here, which determines the direction and I think, this move in its entirety, which I don't believe was fully fabricated by a short squeeze, even though a lot of people would say it is. I don't know if they saw the opportunity, the writing on the wall. I'm not sure. But I haven't done this kind of a fib thing on GME. No, I haven't. This marker, this is confusing to me because I'd been under the assumption that this wasn't just a shift. But I don't know if, again, the operator already knew that this was likely going to happen. This distressed stock was going to come down, and they just kind of rebuilt it back to their original levels. Again, this is part of the reason why I'm not convinced. Because if your operator was short here, then their average would have been really, really, really high. And it may even be, I don't know how this is possible, but I guess if you have short shares, you don't technically have to cover them. So I know I said that shorts aren't hurting, and I agree with that. I don't think they're hurting. I don't think they were opening short positions on the bottom here, is what I'm trying to say. And if that's the case, then presumably they may not have exited all their short positions, and they may have short positions that they entered up here as well, all the way back down to their original. You think about this, if this was your original entry, let's say from 70 up to 114, and then it passes it again, you may have covered a lot of those. You may not cover all of them, but you could basically just now enter new short positions from 400 down to 70 again, and then you're going to walk it through and sell. Well, what are you selling? You're probably selling from where you bought here, right, on these lows. And you can sell high, and then you can sell it down, open new short positions, and drive the price the other way. It's like an inverted squeeze as well, because you're causing all these other people to sell off. Huge sell-offs, right? And we know that because Vanguard sold 60 million or something ridiculous in this time period as well. They were selling. So there's evidence here that suggests that they could still have pretty massive short positions, but it would not be that they were trapped. It would be that they're going to make a lot of money on it when they cover. That could be part of this, is how do you get from A to B, okay? I don't know. I'm not going to go there right this second. That's just speculation anyways. This idea, though, is really intriguing to me, and I'm not 100% sure what to make of it just yet. But this idea is really intriguing to me as a manner of direction. If GameStop were to go down into the November direction, it would be very low. And weirdly, you can see of course, because this angle is the same and it's the same place, this would be very low, 13, really low. Now, most people are that's never going to happen. But, I mean, if it's right before a massive push, it could. This is also a wave down, potentially. So I wouldn't put it past them. I think what's more likely if it did drop, and again, I'm not saying it will, but if it did drop maybe a little bit higher, around 15 at the lowest, and people have already told me they don't think that's possible, but I don't care, because the same people that may have said that would probably have looked back at this and said, well, Did it ever go below here? And the answer is, well, not really, but it was basically like a double bottom. And that's still low. That's like 17 something. I don't find it to be ridiculous, is what I'm trying to say. I don't find it to be outlandish. I think it's just possible. I don't know. So I'm looking at that. I'm thinking like, well, maybe this is a pivot down and it changes now. And we're not going to see that continuation. Regardless, even if this were the case, you know, and I'm guessing, my guess is right here. This probably is, the 44 is probably where, if this were at an angle, I haven't done it yet, so I'm going to try it. But if this were at an angle, my guess is going to be like right there. Yep, really close. So potentially, I guess this could be at a different spot around 40. If this is like slight angle, but I can't really confirm that right now. I'd have to go back and check it. I'm just curious. I wonder if it's not actually flat. It just looks really flat because these are super nice. And this looks really nice, time-wise. It could be that it's not exactly flat, in which case that's very low. That'd be like 34 in November. That's a completely different story, isn't it? You guys are like, that sucks. Well, I don't know. You know, one of them's flat, one of them's not. What are you going to do? I don't have an answer for that right now. I would say that looks like a halfway point, and I think that's probably true. If you look at this from where we are currently, yeah, it's like exactly halfway almost. So it's probably just, again, that idea of a fan and having like multiple targets here. I think that's probably right. So I'll leave this one on the chart for now, but I'm not gonna mess with it too much. What I want to do is really look at this, because what occurred to me also was like, I just did this on AMC, and I used a different number. I used this guy right here. It was on September 12th. And I thought that was actually a better, from the gap up, that was actually a better middle. There's a reason I'm doing the small thing again. I thought that was a really strong potential for a middle on the middle, like the middle of the middle, if you will. So if you go through like the center mark here, roughly January to February, this makes sense to me, and it also kind of defines the wave pretty well. And it did a good job, anyways, in my opinion. I'm trying to remember how I did the markup for this. We only go back to 5, just on a sideways period. But yeah, this was kind of how I did the one of the markups on the angles, and I was looking at this guy as this like hook breakdown. I'm really using it as a part of this. The reason I want to do this is because I think now that I've kind of seen that the bigger picture is indeed the same. Now I really want to see if we can find out. It's got to be that jump motion right here though. So that changes things. Because I'm looking at this gap up, and I'm like, where is that gap up in relationship? Is it just the absolute bottom? It could be. I mean, we've used this bottom before, but this is actually like the first bottom. And that would be like using an S-curve that starts from March for the macro. It starts from March 2020 as opposed to where it took off from. But there's another possibility, which is right here from like 20 to 22. This is where it jumps the creek. And we see that it actually jumps it right here. That's a possibility. So as a different form of wave, and I don't know how this is going to look, so bear with me. But then where is this? So there's a consolidation, it drops, and then this is like a final breath. This goes underneath the hook. This is consistent because if you go to, I think this is consistent. Let me check. if you go to the gap value, that drives right through it. And if you go to the, yeah, this is driving through it already. Maybe it is just the low. Let me go through this value right here. I don't know. They both look fine. I don't know. It's really just one bottom to the next. You can see it's like both of these bottoms. So I'm not really sure. There is a gap up value right here in April. It looks like it's relating to this May 2022 down through this drop. Yeah, I would say that's probably the most likely place. I wonder if that November is really the defining feature here. So if this gap's up to there, it's possible that that was a back test. That was actually that big run up that we had was actually a back test to there. That's right where it is. I'm positive because I marked it off. I anchored it. It's right here. It's at 77.21. That actually looks really nice because it goes through the November bottom right here. And then that would have peaked. You can't see it because it's in extended trading hours. And I've been flipping back and forth from the daily, and my daily doesn't have the extended trading hours on it. So you can see that it would have been right there. And that goes back to this bottom, or close to it. It's kind of in between. Anyways, it's at an angle. And that's where the jump is here on the on the January 15th, 2021. Which is at $12.90. Pretty familiar to us is recently. Yeah, that's really where that top is. I mean, I said 1380, but if you look at that, it's got to be like that same pocket right here. I mean, it has to be. It's got to be that. That's really going back through the bottom of the bigger S-curve here. Even though there's information beneath it, this is weirdly consistent with that shift chart too. I don't know if you recall. Yeah, because that shift chart, I had used this marker, and I talked about like this might be the actual like target that they had in mind. It looks really close, this region. So somewhere in here between, I know that there's an absolute bottom. I get that. I'm not dumb. I understand that. But somewhere between like 1290 and 1525, I think those are good numbers. They may not be perfect, but they're good. We're not going to get it on the first try necessarily. Let's do 1530. Let's do 1530 and let's do 1290. Because I think, and that is where that gap is right here too. I think that's a good call. What are you doing, Booksy? Why are you doing all this? I'm trying to get, if you don't know what I'm doing, I'm trying to see if I can determine where that macro wave is. One of the challenging things about this is just not knowing exactly how to draw it. I think in the past, again, I've used these angles. They're quite steep, but I don't necessarily think that's the way to draw it, because if this is actually going down, then it won't be accurate. I might ditch the fib fan for a bit and just work on this, because I don't think the fib fan is going to really help. So I think I'm going to ditch the fib fan group for just a bit, because again, I don't really think that's going to help very much. And then what we'll do is we'll draw a proper parallel. Yeah, that's the November top right here. So I did a pretty good job. I was eyeballing it. I didn't really know where it was exactly. This kind of implies it could be even lower. So it's not using that marker very much. It's there, but there's another one that's a little bit better. Or, which would be a little bizarre, this part's lower. I don't really find that to be very credible though. I like this one. This is where it jumps the EMA. I think this is the best one. I'm just going to leave it. For this, I think I'm going to favor I don't know. We've got to do something because we have to know where the middle is. Like we have to. I kind of want to favor like the center of this instead of that top area. I know we just did all this crap about the top, but I kind of want to center the favor like the center of this. See how there's like a curve there, and it's kind of like wrapping around a center. I know that this goes above it. I get that. I'm well aware. But the reason for that is because when I'm drawing a curve, I just need to see where it changes, but I don't really need the peaks. Like that's not necessary. I need to see like the average of where it changes direction. That's pretty close. That's going to be as close as I'm going to get. I'm not going to drag it down more. That looks correct here and here. And that's fine. We'll leave that. We have some new information here about the chart. The new information is the 50-50 down. So again, November to November to November, it goes 50-50 down. I'm less concerned about being exact. I'm more concerned about it kind of being visually correct. Yeah, because I think this middle at like 9, it's like 881, which really close to the 882. It's really close to that 891 we got the other day. This one is kind of, I'm just picking like the middle of this section. This is more like, yeah, that's right. And there's the middle there. So again, if I were doing this is complicated though, because then it would be like, it should be like way down here, but that's not right. This should have been like the lower portion. This might be where the chart shift comes into play. That's kind of spooky. This motion right here. Oh, that's weird. Okay. So let me start with a flat, like a flat wave, and then let me go from there. Let me start with that. I'm going to start with that. I'm not going to use this one. I don't know if I could do a what would the wavelength be though? So November, I guess you could use November, or you could use, yeah, because this is also November 9th. This is also November, so I guess you could just go November to November and then offset it. That would be doable. And then the next November is right here. I know this is going to be off in the current time because obviously we didn't run up. Or we failed to advance. Because it's iterating again. But at least for now, I think this would be the way you would do it. So, yeah, that's about right. 'Cause this goes to about that bottom. think that's correct. And then it would be November again, which is right there. So then what do you do, Buxy? How do you fix it? I don't know. So it goes through that thing. But it's not that simple because we know that the markup and the markdown are the same. So does that mean they've just abandoned any kind of idea of a shift? We're really kind of wasting our time with it. I'm not sure. Well, I know that's wrong, obviously, because it didn't go up there. But, like, I'm wondering now, we have a remaining time right here, right? So there's still, like, an extra time in this bottom that's not accounted for. So even though we're doing this kind of sharp S-curve, it's failed, right? There might be another way to measure it. So I need to keep that in mind. Okay, that doesn't do anything. But then we also have this iterative function that's the same. And it starts in November of 2017. That could be a big part of this too. We're kind of using like a small short-term wave. We also know this has a hook. It's the same as these other problems that we've had with the S-curves, is like not knowing where the middle should be based on like we know it should be here, but we don't know where inside of here it really needs to be. And I've had thoughts that it might be more closely associated with these kind of big push-ups and down before the final one, which I guess I would look at that as like maybe this one in February. Like if I were looking at this on the big picture, you know, or if I thought this was a smaller chart, I would probably be looking at this as like that might be the middle, which is very different than November to November. That doesn't yield the results you want, does it? I already know like the long dated one. And then there's the issue of like time. This is taking a really long time here compared to here. Or excuse me, we're taking a really long time compared to where we were here. So it's just slow. It's like really slow. All right, so one of the key takeaways, I suppose, we just need to kind of get this out of the way here. One of the key takeaways is resistance, and then it breaks resistance, and it starts a new resistance. And now we're on like a higher resistance, so like we're up further. We're doing really the same thing conceptually. I mentioned this before, but there was another chart that I used. So this was the one that has the shelf kind of offset a little bit, but I used the 2636, 0.2636 chart, and I don't know if it's going to let me add it, but I'll try. It's not on here. The other ones are more about variations. So I use 0.2636 instead of 2. See if that works. Instead of 2. That time of day, it's like noon time. Man, somebody gets home and just starts streaming like Korean dramas or something every day. I don't know what's going on. I'm killing my internet connection every single day around noon. Well, hopefully it comes back quick. All right, I think we're back. So, yeah, it's not working. I don't know why it's not working. I forgot how to do this the right way. Oh, now it is. Okay, whatever. Yeah, so I was making a point here when I did this last time that if you use it doesn't really matter. If you use this and you do a 0.2636, it actually matches the middle. And if you do it that way, it's different because this motion right here, all this walk down, right, till the push out, actually looks quite similar to what we experienced here after we hit the LSPY, right? It's longer, but it's more of a flat line. I don't know why I was saying that. I was just trying to make a point. You can see that motion right there. That this walk down would be kind of like build a resistance there. Specifically, I guess I was using like a slightly lower angle like that one. But anyways, I digress. The point was that this is a resistance, it breaks out. This is a resistance now. If it breaks out, it probably been going since like maybe back here, even November or a little after that. And we are on top of it right now. I think we're in a good spot. We're looking at these parallels saying, yeah, there's consistency here, but we're landing on top of this one. Even if it comes low to like 226, we're landing on top of it. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to see if this wave down is still in play or if it's just shifted. And right now it's looking more like it's just shifted. Or no, it's looking more like it's not shifted. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Because if I just take this and pull it down, even if I'm measuring from the middle, unless I think, again, this is the middle, which is, again, longest possible middle. And none of these are really adding up. They're kind of moving away from it. And it also assumes that the wavelength is the same, but it could totally be expanding or contracting. I think expanding is more likely than contracting. That's interesting. I know there's a sine wave function on here, I'm aware, but okay. Now I'm just checking something. Now let's take it a step further. We're going to use the sine wave tool. I wonder if November. See, I don't think it's straight across. This makes it really difficult. I'm even trying to visualize it, but we could think about it in terms of breakdowns instead of trying to find a peak. Like, when does it shift direction? I mean, if you're looking at this motion right here, this would be kind of the peak, but you can tell it's not on a peak. It's on like the breakdown. So it could be that really we're searching for a kind of a ghost. It's not really there. Because by the time you're breaking out, it's already on the upward motion. It's not like that low is not the bottom. Like, it's already going back up. presumably something like this would make more sense. Again, like where's the breakdown? It's over here. It's already going down. But then the breakout's here. This is closer. This is closer to where we're getting, but I think we're still a little off. So I'm trying to use a wavelength that roughly matches that's pretty close. So I'm looking at here, way back here in the beginning of the chart. Specifically when it forms its first support, which is right there. There's not much else to it. That's the area where there's a first support. I don't know if I'd use the very beginning. There's a little tiny like directional move here and then an M. It pumps up and then it goes into a weakness and drops that support right away. But that might be the first place that we actually have a support. How do you do this, Booksy? Think about it. Well, I mean, this kind of makes sense because if you look at where I made that middle, it's actually like a peak on the wave. At first glance, that looks wrong, but if I thought about this like a cat ear, that could just be like where it's like finally like done, you know? And a lot of times on these waves, I feel it hits like a high early and then it kind of boils down. So that's not necessarily wrong. That could be quite indeed like the middle or very close to it. But that being said, I feel like it's a little ambiguous and I'm not really confident about it. Obviously, the wave doesn't look right visually. I don't know if there's going to be ever a perfect way to draw it. If it's going down, you can't do it because the trading view is great, but it doesn't have, you know, the ability. We could use a shift, but we don't have the ability to turn this or rotate the wave. So let's go through. Yeah, I mean that looks nice, but that's just a nice kind of grab there. I don't know what that means beyond just visually looking better. This might not be the answer. All right, let me try one more thing. I'm going to do this like manually, the way I would normally do it, and I'm not going to worry about trying to find this like perfect wavelength just yet. This is taking too much time. There's two possible points where this rejects off the top, ultimately. One's right here, which I think of it as just like a middle, possible middle. And then this one, which is the more definite rejection, which is it goes over the top, comes back and hooks. That's really close to the drop. It's an easier one to do. And then if I were looking at where does this move from a bottom, I could either use here where it enters and it breaks out into the new range. I could actually use the January bottom too. That's possible. Where it's trying to establish like a new norm, which makes sense because ultimately this is apparently holding up. You know, if you look at where that January bottom is, that's where we took off from here. We checked it and we took off from there. So, I mean, in theory, that could actually be the middle or the bottom of the range on a wave. This is going to be a little bit tricky to do. So what I want to do is go from here. I think I already know the answer, but go from here to, it's really low. But it kind of makes sense. Because see how this is like a double, if you think about it in like three-dimensional space, this like hits the first and then it like jumps over the second, hits the second. This comes down, it hits the first here and rejects, it tries again, and then it tries again. It really rejects off the final one in the end, and then it drops. So it's very clear to me that this was, walking through here, which is fine. Let me measure that out and see if it's about the same. I don't think it's going to be the same, but we'll see. Not really. This is what I found earlier too. It looked like this was off by a little bit. And like September was the better middle, or like was the better final rejection, which is really odd. Really odd. This is what I found earlier too when I did those lines, because it was like it didn't measure out evenly. I don't know if it's supposed to, but it just didn't. Yeah, I mean, if you ignore the two extended markers here on either side, that's a little closer, so that's possible. All right, whatever. Get to the point. So this is eventually the bottom. We already know that. This is eventually the top, even though it doesn't look like a top, but this is where it's transferred to before it drops, because we know this is an equal move to this. So this motion here to here is a wave up, and then same motion down. Let me get the angle right. 65.12, 65.07. Let's get it close enough. 13. Right there to there. Yeah, it makes me want to use the February top because of that just phenomenon right there. So maybe what I'll do is, instead of this measure to the outskirts, this is gonna be dicey. Oh man, what are you trying to achieve here, Booksy? I'm trying to achieve something. Man, I hate this because it's going to be really low. But I think there's no other choice. I'm basically recreating what I did earlier, but I don't think there's another choice here. It's like the same, because you have to go from like middle to middle. This is where things get kind of weird, because it's not going to match. It's not going to match the this trend, even though you quote unquote should match. It's not going to. This is hard. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have got rid of that angle, because ultimately we need it. And again, this isn't really about, I hope you guys know, this isn't really about this trajectory by itself. This trajectory is kind of just a defining middle trajectory. Like if you're turning up a curve, you're going to have like tangents, right? The tangent in the center is the one we want to try to get close to, the center of the wave, because that's going to be the most average of the trajectories. That's going to be the most, I guess we would want to say, like, that's the most likely trajectory to give us a little bit more accuracy on like a bigger picture wave. We won't be able to get it perfect because I don't have the ability to draw it on here, because TradingView is kind of stupid in that way. I don't know if any program that can do sine waves like with anchors, but they need to do that, because the market doesn't move in sideways action 90% of the time. It's going up or down, so usually not going just sideways. Well, I guess that's not true. I mean, it goes sideways a lot, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to make a point. So in theory, from middle to middle here, that would be the center of two waves. I don't think there's going to be a lot of definition because, and you're probably looking at it like there's no way there's no interaction here, so why would that matter? Well, remember we're going through like extremes, so we're talking about like an extreme middle, and we're projecting that forward. This is very low. We're definitely going to have to do, I hate to say it, but we're definitely, because it's like more work. We're definitely going to have to do the bigger one because this would only be a piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole thing. And I'm not going to assume it's 1-to-1 perfectly. I'm just going to kind of make it the way it is. It's very close to 1-to-1, but I don't think it actually is. Or if it is, it's like really close, but I don't think it's like exact. I'm trying to say it's really, really close. Okay. So we have a down direction. We have an up direction. We have a down direction. So based on this and this alone, all of these angles that I drew earlier are kind of off. I really need to make sure that's in the right spot here. I kind of eyeballed it, but that might be wrong. Yeah, so I don't know if there's a better way to do this. Somebody's going to be like, you're doing this completely wrong. I was like, I don't know. It's the best way I can do it. That's all I can do. You guys are like, this doesn't make any sense. There's reason, there's rhythm to this. There's a reason for it, but I guess I have to sort of just take it one step at a time. Yeah. So I mean, low key, I guess you could just kind of draw a trend like we did before, and you could just say, well, that's where it's going to hit. It's not going to go beyond the trend. But I think that this actually shows that there's a possibility that the trend itself isn't really defining the defining feature. I know it sounds weird, and like, why would you do that? Why not just have it go exactly where you want it to go? And don't have the strongest answer. Unless it's like a wedge. Yeah, I know. To some degree. That's true. That's just from drawing on this thing for years, but I feel like okay, what I need is an answer. I don't need another question. So I need to look for answers. There's only two possibilities here. I'm not even going to really worry about the bottom so much. There's only two distinct possibilities here because the inner trajectory matters, but there's really only two possibilities because you're really going to go from bottom through the middle. And this is where things are going to get kind of unfortunate because I guess is because this middle doesn't really present us. I already kind of knew this part, I suppose. This doesn't really present us with a lot of good upside. Um, this suggests March 2027, which is really slow. That doesn't match the wavelength though. And then this one suggested November 2024, which is interesting because we did have a pop there, but there's no continuation. Neither of those is quite right. So how do we determine where it is? Why can't March 2027 be right? It could be right. There's just not much there. Like, it's basically just assuming that this is a channel. If this is the channel as it is, then that's where it could be. But the thing is that the pivot was really low. Like, this squashed down. So there's not that much evidence that that's where the channel is. The other thing I'm thinking is that maybe that peak right here that we hit at 70, that could be like the middle right there on this guy, which could be right. That's another one. And that one actually looks pretty good. That one looks a lot better than the others, albeit it does not include the breakdown point that we're looking at, but that's okay. So that's different. That actually gives you December 2025. That gives you January 2025 at $15. Why does that look wrong? I guess because normally when you're doing this, normally the magnitude is just as high. Like, you feel like it should go back higher up. But if you were to draw through the middle here, this is what I'm attempting to do basically. Okay. Like this. I'm trying to project where that top is. But in order for me to know that, like, that this is even where the top would be, you have to know that this is horizontal. Like, that's the triangulation right there. Without that, you don't have anything. So, like, it just would go on indefinitely. You have to have it intersect time at some place. So in order for this to work, you have to sort of be able to map this accurately. So if this is going down in a downward angle, it doesn't make any real difference because it should work regardless. If it's a proper wave, doesn't mean it's going to be perfect every time, but like if this hits bottom, then this hits top, and then this hits bottom, I wouldn't make it horizontal and say this is definitely going to come back to the top again. I would use whatever the angle is, and I would say that, all right, well, I don't know. We'd have to kind of know where the wavelength is, but we'd use this, and we would suggest that from the middle here, this is what I'm trying to do, this is approximately where it should intersect if the wave remains regular. And these are multi-year legs. These are not fast things, they're slow. This is what I was doing when I was like, oh, it looks like February 2026. So that's the theory there. So this doesn't even come back up to the top. Well, how do you know this works, Booksy? Because I've done it, and it works. All right. Maybe AMC is a little janky at times, but this has worked. So I'm trying to kind of replicate that same idea, but I needed to know where the breakdown was. I know where the middle is, possibly. If we use the three middles here, it's pretty high, but the thing is it didn't stop there. That would have been easier, because if it had stopped there, I'd be like, all right, that's the middle. But it didn't stop there. It did it again down. So it didn't stop in November just below this bottom, which is, again, the 50-50 down. Go November, November, November. That would have been really easy, because we would have been like November, November, November. But that didn't happen. Instead, this goes like way lower, you know, and then it does it again. So it's like way out here now. I'm trying to visualize this. So it's like, yeah, it doesn't stop. It just kind of keeps going. So it starts generating like a new low. I just don't know. I don't know what you would do there. I guess you would just use the new low, which is what I'm trying to do. So you would just extend that down. And that drops it. And this is why I've thought for a little while that this is actually significantly lower. because I think they shifted it. I think they shifted that value down. This is really hard because I don't have a I need to get a grip. I'm trying to think too about what the normally there is a creek here, and that's exactly what we're seeing, is that this was a creek defined and it didn't stop where we expected it to stop. Instead it goes lower, at least on 50-50 terms, by quite a bit. I mean, decent amount. And then it stops really low on the creek. Maybe that's the key. That's a much better way to look at this. At least for now. We should look at where it left the creek and where it came back to the creek. Because that length of time right there is pivotal, I think. I'm just going to copy this. I'm just going to see what that is. Very interesting. That is November 2017. Okay. There you have it. I don't know what you have, but you got something. I wonder if the operators aren't using... That doesn't make sense. That's also November. Yeah, I bet your operators are using this trend right here, because this actually hits November more than a few times. This is more starting to accurately match that bottom too. Here to here. Really close. Gotcha. Okay. We're getting there. It's taking a minute, but we're getting there. All right. Let me just see if I can find a middle here. I'm just going to kind of do what I did here. I'm going to find a middle. And we need to kind of clean this up a bit. So I'm going to just pick a different color. I'm going to get rid of these arrows here. Not a bad guess. That's pretty close. So this is a different angle. I realize that than this other guy, but there's a reason. I think that it's going kind of, it's using this as like the downward motion. Since this angle down, this white trend down is being defined by the creek, like this original creek right here. Everything is following it because that's the wave that is following. But if you look before then, there was a longer term trend that I think was more established and ultimately probably mattered more. This is the one that, again, looks like it goes back, I think, to the beginning of the stock. And we've talked about this one before, a long time ago. There looked like there was an early, really early trend there. So this is a little different, but this could be a more defining feature as well. I'm going to go to November over here, and we'll mess with that later. That one looks like it touches the March top pretty well too, by comparison to the other one, which was a lot steeper. Right. So in order for this to work, I have to use the same point. That is pretty close. That's close to the that's closer to the middle. If we go to November, yeah, that's like the center mark. So if you use November instead, the center is right here. That's the jump over the center. So there's an SOS, a backup, and then this is the reaccumulation where it bottoms out at like 45 now. That also checks that same parallel, but that's on it's like a whole nother level of complexity there, because when you talk about what this actually is, this could be a middle of a middle. So like a quarter. Yeah, and then this is a 75 right there. That makes sense. And that's where it drops from anyways, so all right. So let me get rid of these. I don't want to get rid of that measurement yet. So again, up and then down. And we don't know why, but this took way longer. Everything about this took longer than anticipated. But it just did. There's no denying that. It just bottom to bottom, it's a lot slower. All right, so forget this stuff. I'm going to use the middle here, which I don't know. It's kind of dangerous to do it that way, but I'll do it that way. And it should be the middle here. Here. I know it's not lined up, but that's where it should be. If I use like the center mark, so this needs to come down to the bottom. I'm going to use centers. I don't know how else to do it, because I don't know if you should use the beginning or the end, but I'm going to have to I have to find something that I can use, one that already exists. I can't pick something that I don't know where it's going to be, and then I just have to I say assume, but I really kind of have to assume that that's where it's going to be. Yeah. Even though, yeah, that looks lower, I think that's about right. So yeah, this seems right, because then if you look at the distance on either side of this, that's pretty darn close. So if you look at that, there's no connections there. That's not the point. The point is we were trying to figure out like whether this was where the middle is, and like that's actually pretty darn close, guys. That's really good. This is where we thought between the two places where it leaves the creek and returns to it, that could be like a middle. And you can see that on either side of that, the angle that we drew between the next region here is roughly centered. So that'd be like a rough center. It doesn't include the last bit, the spring. It just includes the first two bottoms, because we don't have the spring yet per se. So it's like we don't really know. And so it's an unwise measurement to use because we don't have it yet. But we do have two bottoms here, and we do have two bottoms here. So I used that to find what I thought the middle was. And it is very, very close, I think, to the same distance away from this middle, which is good. And I'm just eyeballing that. I'm just trying to get like a proper structure. And this is not as easy as I wished it was, because I know that November to November breakdown, now it makes a little bit more sense because it's going from one parallel to the next to the next. And this ends up being like roughly a 50% mark. I haven't actually done the channel yet, so I'm not sure that that's 100%. I'm just, again, eyeballing it. Not 100% that that's halfway. But now that we have those two bottoms, Yeah, that should be an approximate middle, right where August is. That's freaky. I wonder if the August ape date is like the middle on this wave. I guess it would make more sense than a lot of things, but yeah, it basically is. That's August 22nd. It's like August 17th or close to it. So now we're getting a little bit more like precise with these margins. We're not like going way off into la la land, off to the sides. There it is. So that's the up down right there. And then it does enter like at a halfway point. So it never hits the top again. There's no previous top here. It's always like halfway. This obviously hasn't either, but we have enough. This is actually enough information to do what we wanted to do. So from here to here, I'm just, estimating it. Where is the halfway? I hate this chart so much, guys. The halfway point is right on the split value. So it actually makes sense. But again, that would have made sense because we should have measured from top to bottom on the channel. So it should be halfway. But it is profound, I suppose, to some. It would be profound to me. And that is November 27th, 2026. Maybe a little after that. Well, let me double check. I mean, if I'm off a little bit on these, it could end up being quite significant at the end. So I want to do my best here. I think that this is correct, though. That August 15th pop is like a middle of the road kind of move right there. I think August 12th, August 15th, that seems about right. And I think I did it right because I'm looking really at that creek and how it interacted with the creek. So I'm feeling good about that. This is July 8th, maybe the 7th. Feeling good about that. This one looks a little off. How did I do this again? Maybe October 7th. I suppose if you look back at this is kind of like a similar place. It's like a valley, and this is like a valley. Maybe there's something to that ends up being like the same motion. You know, you can see the motion up here. It's really similar. I would say we're probably pretty close. It may be closer to September 17th. That was the other date we got, but I can't really tell. Yeah, I can't really tell. I mean, there's no way to know. Like, if we're really perfect, this is just going to be the best we can do. And then the sideways motion is the one we really want. And that needs to be as close as possible. It's important to note something here, guys and gals, which is that this doesn't actually ever come down as low as this pivot. I mean, this pivot's at like 986 on the chart. This never gets that low. You know, the pivot that we have here, it's not impossible, but this is $2. And I mean, I'm just saying, like, sometimes those numbers that you see, like we've been seeing 2 and 226. I was trying to tell you guys, like, I'm saying it repeatedly, like that's happened. That happened back here too. You could have gotten lower value targets. There was a ton of them. If you go back and you do it in retrospect, a lot of these S curves and stuff, they should be going like a little bit lower. but they don't. Once they hit that floor and they make that retracement back over the top, and they hit that phase B support, they just go. Like the spring is a liquidity test. So I've been trying to urge people to not worry too much. Like I don't really care that much how low it goes. I mean, people are really obsessed with catching the bottom and pinpointing it and all this stuff. Those numbers are great. Like they're probably legit. I've got plenty myself. They're real numbers. They could hit. They could. It's a maybe thing though. Like I really don't think it's wise to I just don't. I do not think it's wise to count on it because the floor is where the floor is. The floor is not down there. Not yet. The floor is at like 246 and 239, like 246 specifically. Like if it dumps through 246 and comes back up, you're going to be questioning it till kingdom comes, if you think that you got to wait for this lower number. I just don't think that's wise. They just be really careful about that because everybody has those low targets. I have them. I have a lot of them. I don't think they're impossible. I think they're very possible. But it's like Schrodinger's cat, right? It's in the box. You don't know if it's alive. You don't know if it's dead. Just leave it. Don't try to make a bet based on whether or not it's alive or dead. Just know that the box is the box, right? It's there. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go there. I'm sorry. I just don't believe that. So, like, I got to be clear about that because, again, like previously there was indication here this could have gone lower, but it just doesn't have the steam to do it. And it hits the proper unbalanced levels and then it goes, like the volume levels, and then it goes. It's just whatever their goal is. We can see those targets. They're there. We know they're there, but I just would not count on it, as a guarantee. There's other ways you could do it and say like, well, it does this. Like I could take this trend and make it work however I want to work it. I could say, well, it's going to come back down to here, right? It has to be at $1.90, maybe, and that's a good level. But that's why we're getting that level, partially. Because it is a solid level. A lot of people should be getting that. I think it's a great level. But like, that to me, it doesn't mean that's definitely going to happen. I find it to be a question mark. Because the floor is not at $1.90. It's at $2.39 and $2.46. That's just a potential for spring action. All right, so that being said, this is December 2026 at $32. As best as I could say, with anything in the world, as good of a job as I could possibly do, that is correct. Now, I just copied this. I knew it would work if we did the math right, because that's the way it works. That's the way math works. That doesn't mean, as you can tell, that actually is the peak. And I need to point that out because like here, that's not the peak. This is where the center of a wave is. So like if you were drawing a wave, and I know this is a mess, but if you were drawing a wave, it'd be more accurate to go from like the middle and suggest that's the middle of the wave, right? And then have another wave here. And you'll note that it's probably not going to be equivalent. It should be like halfway from one to the next. So we can build it. And I guess if we wanted to build it, we could. I don't find it to be 100% necessary because we sort of already know some of the answers, but we could try. I'll do it as best I can anyways. I mean, that makes sense because this is like approximately back up to this zone. And it is that drop down level, man. It's that, there it is right there. Like that's the 2-year cycle level at 2019. That's the one we found before. This one, yeah, I mean, it goes right through the split. That's where the middle is. But it is indeed lower. as it should be. It's not that steep. So one question we could ask that we haven't yet asked, it should be down here, which kind of explains a lot, because now I'm starting to think that that might be why we're seeing that curve here so much and why it's not straight. Like I've talked about that before. I thought it wasn't horizontal. It's actually downward. And this kind of explains that. This one was also downward. It is way overdue timing wise. This was October 27th. I've said this before. I don't know how else to like qualify it, because it sounds like a crazy man who just won't let go of his tinfoil hat theories. But I just don't, I can't let it go. Like, I knew that there was something wrong, like a little bit off in the chart when they announced those warrant things. I just couldn't quite pinpoint it. Now, there's still a lot of evidence here that like maybe November is supposed to be the day, but like the rest of this structure did not seem that long-winded until then, until it hit like August. And then all of a sudden it was like, all right, we're just, now everything's like expanding. It's like it's not moving quickly enough, fast enough is what I said to people. And they kept asking me like, well, what is fast enough? I'm like, I don't really know, but it's just not pacing correctly. Like everything about it is slightly off now. And you look at this kind of stuff and you're like, yeah, I mean, you could have thought maybe it was off here when it was going down and it still breaks out. So maybe it's not that complicated. I don't know. The other thing that we have to consider is that if this is indeed shifted, this could be actually smushed more. I don't want to say it's like a half of a half, but there is the potential that it did indeed make that mark. We thought it didn't, but maybe it did. Because, I mean, in theory, if you take this same thing and you draw it out to here, maybe it did. Maybe it did go to where it was supposed to go to. I don't know. That mark was only supposed to go to 330, and it went up to like 320, and they called it a day, you know. It's where they wanted it to be at that time. So they're going to keep it like low and squished. That would stink, wouldn't it? I'm kind of arbitrarily putting middles here into like another halfway point between two marks. I'm visually just kind of looking at it and putting them in the middle because I just think it looks better. I can see it a little bit better. I don't really care if it hits the bottom. I want it to kind of go through it like it goes through this. But even this one, I'm like, really, you probably could have drawn it through there, closer to that. And the same here. You could have drawn it through here. And these are just massive extensions around it. So the sine wave is moving up and down, you know, through it, and it's kind of reacting. So we're stretching and then we're kind of pulling back the other way. Yeah. So that's a maybe. Last one would be this guy, and this is where that number comes from. See that? So it should work. It does work. Here to here is pretty low. This is what makes sense to me, though. I kind of agree with this. This looks pretty much exactly what I imagined it would look like. Because now if you look at this big picture, it looks like a breakdown with like a hook that's coming back up, and it's not exceeding $19 on average. This is really dang close to that 1960, that middle gap. Really dang close. And that was what I was trying to say when you guys were, everyone was asking, and I was saying too, I didn't like that I had to change it, but it definitely seemed to me that like there was a shift. And I don't know if this means it doesn't go any higher. You could tell it could, but there's definitely some kind of a shift. And then there's the bottom. Yeah, this is no this is almost no different than what I had before. So it was like it needs to come back and retest that bottom. That's what I've been saying. So the question is, when does that happen? We don't have perfect evidence of this because there's no one size fits all here. Like, but you would say if you look at this wave, there's actually quite a nice, I think. This is the interaction here. You can see it. There's an interaction with the this is crazy. There's actually an interaction with this this other, you can see that rotation. This is the one that's derived from the creek. So there's an actual perfect interaction here. Even that, what the heck? Even that backup right there. Yeah, it's nice. It's like going up, and then it's kind of using that as a new support, trying to drive the price down through the creek. So like, there's a clear indication that it could go up ahead of time. This is like halfway, about halfway between the two. But who knows? The way this timing is right here, it's super slow. I mean, I don't want to curse on the stream, but I want to curse right now because I'm like, look at this. It literally is like not moved. The setup. Maybe you guys are like, well, you're just wrong, Booksy. That's all there is to it. You can't know the future. You can't know anything. Yeah, I know, but we just did a chart and it said 891. Shoot, maybe it will happen, guys. I don't know. Maybe I'm just jumping the gun. But it said 891 seemed like a pivot point. But it was like the expectation was you were going to leave in October and get there, not all of a sudden and get there. And now I'm like, why? How could you do this? And with all this dilution and crap, you can't do it. But I'll be damned, if that's not the right level, that is exactly where that other chart that I did yesterday, that's exactly where it is. That's 891 right there. That is right on the money where it needs to be on this other chart. That's the halfway point. So look back at this in terms of like movement. You can see what I mean. Like that's the place it needs to come above and then hold a support in order to go again. But this is completely different, like timing wise, because unless they're just going to, again, like hyper compress it, because this already had been at the peak by the halfway point of the wave. So something has changed for sure in terms of timing. I'm not going to defend myself anymore about it. I'm just going to say, like, I believe, okay, I'll just say it's my opinion because it's just like my opinion, man, right? It's just like your opinion, man. I'll just say that I believe that the timing has changed. And that it may sound like a cop-out, but I'm just sitting here looking at it like the extremity of the move is halfway. And then the same thing applied here. The extremity of the move is halfway. So I know that like from move to move, that seems correct. And then the extremity of the move here, nothing has happened. Nothing. This should be the extremity of the move. And it's just not. So either the operator is just kind of hitting the pause button and this is just kind of moving over, to the side. And it really is like, I don't know if you can see it on the chart, but this is really like a 1 year kind of thing because it goes from like November 24 to December 24 to December 25. It's only slightly off November to November. So yeah, it's actually pretty darn close to like 1 year apart. But normally this would be like the extremity of the move, the most extreme portion. Shoot, and that explains that idea, because if you think about it here, going into January, February, like that's where it would be. If that's the extremity of the move, if it somehow passed through here at that time, it might be why February kept coming back up. Because February is getting really close to like the middle of the move. And that's sensible to some degree. If February were where it was peaking, it could hit like 43, which is like that gap fill. And I guess that's kind of where I was before with it, was that maybe that would happen all at once. And I've changed my mind a lot here and there because I don't know if it needs to do that. And I don't know if we're going to get the ammunition to do it. I feel like this might just be where it is and it doesn't go higher than that middle, because I think this is ultimately where we're going to have trouble. But maybe with the shift value and everything and all that other nonsense, give us a little bit of information, because this is roughly halfway where that ledge is. So like, if it's the 2-3 or if it's the 2-6-3-6 ledge, that's right here. This would be like a rough, yeah, that would be the halfway point. Why don't I even bother? I already know it's right where it's supposed to be. I'm sorry. I should have just said that because I knew that's where it was. Yeah, it's basically at 891. That should be the halfway point, roughly. But if it's the other one, which proportionally is a little different, it means that the halfway point would be at like the 1960. But now I'm thinking about 890 and 1960, and I'm thinking that's pretty close to double. Maybe there's just something to that. Maybe these shift values are not wrong. They're probably like standard deviation lengths. So that's why percentages, they make sense. They always seem to kind of click with the chart. Well, let me try something real quick. Let me go through 1960. And it could be a little bit lower. It doesn't really matter. And then we go through here. 891. That's $4 on the dot. It's like 403. It's very close to this 406 or so top. So let me try this. Let's go from 245 or 246. Son of a biscuit. You've got to be kidding me. It's perfect. What are you trying to say, Booksy? 891 from 240. I'm going to make sure it's right. Hang on. Let me just make sure this is right. That's 246. I'm going to make sure this is as close as I can get it, because I know the middles for these things, you can't like strap them into the middle, but I'm going to visually get it, see if I can get it as close as I can. It's like 32... 3240, nope, 3237 through 3227. 3227 to 3237. So it's a 10-cent window. That's pretty small. That's approximately where it is. $32.37. Let's see where that is. Yeah, it kind of looks off to me. It doesn't really look like it meets anything. I mean, I guess it could be like an average or something. It's slightly too low, just barely. Well, here's a question then. How much farther does it have to go in order to actually hit the mark? That'd be a good question to ask, because that could be the spring value. It's an extension, so maybe. Well, 3291 is the intersection. But, and I guess that could be it. I mean, it could be right there. I'm going to go with like 3365 because I think that it needs to come up. I don't know. There's another ledge here. I'm not really sure. Not 100%. But there's another ledge here right there. There's a couple wicks. Maybe we should go to the green candle where it took off. That's like 3350. So let's use 3350. So 3350 minus 20 cents, 20 to 30 cents. So it's a 20 to 30 cent window beneath 246. Of course it is, guys. Why? Because 246 minus 20 is 226. You guys are like, I hate you, Booksy. I know, but it's 226. I told you guys. I think it's 226. I think 226 is the magic number, man. I'm never going to get rid of it. I can't. And then 216, and I had gotten 216. I got 217 the other day. So I was like, I said it the other day, I was like, 217. I don't know. They're coming up a lot. It's either 216 or in my opinion, or 226. I mean, I'm not going to dance around that forever, but that's just it. Those are very likely spring values if this truly is going to go all the way up to like 30 something, which would be great for everybody. But I think that's a big if, right? And then we also have to take into consideration that that's probably a two-part move. As big as this could be, that's probably a two-part move. So what that does is it gives you enough, and I know I'm making a lot of guesses with this 891 thing, but I feel like 891 is the right number. It does jump the creek as you would see it here, like a simple creek from peak to peak. It really makes sense. I know this is a messy McDonald's looking chart here, but like Happy Meal colors. But genuinely, like if you go through the motion here, I don't know how it could have been that perfect. Like on accident. I couldn't possibly have come to 226, right? That's not possible. You manifested it, Booksy. Screw it. I don't want to do that. How does that happen, right? Because we were using like certain estimations here. I don't know. It's magic. He just made it happen. I don't know. It's almost 260 now. We're above 258, man. If we can hold 258, who knows? I'm still looking at 226, right? But like, let's say, for example, this pushed up and it goes to like 1250 or something like that, or 13 or something. I don't really know what needs to happen here per se. I don't think it needs to go that high. I wouldn't be surprised if it stopped short. But in the previous times, in order for it to get up there, you can see it made that motion. I'm not saying it's one-to-one. I think that's a bit of a stretch. We also don't know if that shift value means that all of this is shifted down one, which means it doesn't ever go above 19, which I think is really important, right? We'll have to see what happens at 890, but I guess it's possible if this were going to repeat itself. I don't know. This could go to like 15 or something, and then it would consolidate underneath. You'd have to have a big back up to near 4. It'd go really low. You have to come back to here and check this. And then it would consolidate somewhere underneath 890, and they would eventually take off there. And I'm just guessing, but I'm assuming some things too. But I would say it'd probably be around about February, because that is where the earnings is. I'm not sure there's any other catalyst that matters. That's assuming, again, that it goes really high and it stays there. But it'd have to eventually break above 9 here. And there is a creek coming down. And then it would go, I suppose it would go up here in March or February, and then now it's just an accelerated breakdown. So it's a little confusing, because in order for it to get any higher than that, you'd have to go lower. I didn't do the measure to 42. I only did it to here. And this is what I'm wondering about a shift, because a shift would mean that this could hit like 32. That ends up being the new high. And then when it comes back, it actually goes back down through. So all of this is like less severe, right? And then when it comes back, it goes through. It hits like 30 something, and then it ends up coming back down through here, and it distributes underneath 19 versus being all the way up at 30. And I don't find this to be incredible. I think it's totally possible. It's a little more regular, in fact, in some ways. And all of this is like a breakdown, right? And it's just going back through the motions. But it'd be very, 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 very steep by comparison. It'd have to look like this. This feels reasonable to me, because if a lot of people had an opportunity to get out of this thing, I feel like they probably will. It doesn't match 1-to-1, but then again, it's like this is kind of a micro version of the same ideas. So I'm not sure if it will match. This also makes a little bit more sense of what we would see as like a new resistance level, which is like that previous bottom. Now I'm really blotting it out, right? But that area right here, this really jives quite well with it. I think it works. So it'd be like, yeah, it being squashed beneath 19.6. Yeah, I could feel that. That actually looks quite nice. So I'm comfortable enough saying that like this sort of makes sense to me for a number of reasons. And then also, if you think about it, the design of this was to lay back down on top of that creek, right? Well, we've got a couple different ways that could happen locally. But it'd be worth mentioning that, like, from a micro standpoint, that would actually be quite low. Like, that could actually be really low. So if you think about where this breaks out over time and then where this breaks out over time, it could be all the way down here in like $1.50 range. Yeah. That's why I'm not convinced about all this other stuff, because I think that the operator, we just don't know their mind. And if you go up, if you just happen to have this run up, you know, and it happens in November and it doesn't stop and just goes all the way up, I almost think it'd be almost more likely that it's distributive in a lot of ways. And I'd be very cautious about this coming back to a degree on like a micro level. But yeah. This is the problem with charting like as if it's going to do the same thing all the time. Because like if I saw this and I saw this breakout low and it's like, oh, it's going to come over here, then you'd probably draw some kind of conclusion of your own at some point and say, well, this is going to be like a macro thingamabob, and then it's going to do the same thing, but it's going to do it on like a huge picture. And I'm thinking to myself, well, sure, like I guess, that's possible. It's not like it couldn't happen ever. But it's just so unlikely. It's like, why would you think that's going to happen? Like realistically, it just doesn't make any sense. So I'm like, while I agree that is there, I think this actually gives a pretty realistic picture of the true angle, in my opinion. The way that I chart, this is probably a more accurate depiction of probability, like outcomes, that you're not going to go back above 36 anytime soon. And that even in that, you could technically take a long time to get there. It doesn't have to do it now. There's no like rule that says it has to. We're just looking at wavelengths, and we know it's late, but that's that. The wavelengths are behind. Yeah, I don't know where you're getting those numbers from. That's not accurate. There's no like direct perfect relationship, but like if you look back at the move sets that have been happening, GME often sets up higher. That's a 325% move from where it was, which it was already off the bottom. And that's a big move. Maybe to like proportionally look at these things, you can, but I'm just going to caution you against that. This is also like a near 200 something percent, but more so from the bottom. So like that, it's closer to the same move from the bottom. But AMC often goes down before it moves, and GME goes up. So if you're measuring from similar kind of points of view, AMC tends to wait longer and be lower, and that's about 300%. But that, if you look at where we are now, and you look at this percentage move, you're saying like $90, but going to like 50 something is 144%, 150%. That's not even retesting the top. That's just there. Going to 40%, obviously a lot lower, than 150%. But yeah, I don't think that's necessarily like out of the realm of possibility. This is $6 already, and it's at 150%. That's $6.59. No, so I don't. That's a really blown out number, like that number that you're presenting. It also does not matter what percent each one moves. What really matters is how long they've been going sideways. I think you got that backwards, but GME went way higher from bottom to top here. This is like 400%. If you go from bottom to top here and looking at where the bottom is, it hit before AMC did its bottom. Well, that's not true because it's April 16th. I take it back. It just broke out early. That's 530%. So this went farther. So I know what you're saying, and you're saying like, well, if this is limited to 150% move, right, then there's no way AMC is going to go 150%. But I don't feel like that's, like, these are not targets, in my mind, these are not targets of, like, peaks. I think that needs to be, like, really clear. I don't look at this stuff and think that's the top necessarily. Like, I don't look at 891 necessarily like it has to be the top. There's two possibilities. One is that's a consolidation point, in which case there's an extension and then it returns back to that level. That often happens. Like, it's just a point of interest, but they're going to shoot past it because of FOMO or whatever, you know? And we look back on this, we don't know what's going to happen exactly, but if we look back on this and it ends up going to like, it could go to a new low. We don't know. But maybe it hits a low here and it ends up hitting $20 or $21 or something. And then it goes all the way up. Even that little amount can really change it. And then it goes to like 60. That's like a 200% move. That's not $90, which is just, way out there. But I want you to also notice that, like, relative to itself, that's closing in on the previous peak. So there's more to that proportion, and it's higher than the marker from June. And like, I already demonstrated this at an angle, but like AMC going back to that same marker, it's going back up to here. I mean, it's pretty high. Like, it's the same principle. It may be, again, it's 891 is what I've been saying, because if you look at like where that test is, that same test is there. Now, if you're just looking at one versus the other, they're all different. If you're looking at the top, that's 13. If you're looking at the June top, well, it went farther in extended hours, but it's pretty low. It's at 595. I would encourage you to just consider the fact that, like, it's opening where they want it to open, because that's the level that they're trying to mark off for something. Maybe it's a support later. Maybe it's where the target is later. I don't know. But ultimately, like, my position is not that this is necessarily where it hits a peak, but it could be a peak. It's not necessarily where it consolidates. It's one or the other, right? It's like passing through it or it's whatever, but it's more about like a triangulation of timing. The nature of that is then very subjective as to what that really means and when that happens. I think that's just the region. But I wouldn't be so quick to say that it has to be proportional. I just don't. And you got to remember, like, when AMC runs up in June, this is historically what happened, is that it stopped halfway and then it ran again. And GME had already hit an all-time high. So GameStop has in times run way beyond AMC, and AMC's taken a break in like a middle region. And I think that this is evident in a lot of these setups where GameStop's already out and moving. That happened here in May, and it also happened back here going into November of 2020. I mean, this is where AMC takes a nosedive and goes into a spring, right? And then it plays catch up. So I think there's a sense in which I'd be more, like, I'm way more interested in knowing where these kind of levels are. And frankly, if this hits 52 and it's retesting where it was in November 2021, I don't see that the percentage matters that much. If this comes back and hits 8 and that's retesting where it was in 2021, but it's at an angle. I'm not saying it goes 400% or whatever. This is like astronomically high. So if you're hearing it in my voice, I'm trying to encourage this idea of like caution, because I don't see that as an inevitability. I see it as, hey, this is like a wave, and if the wave goes up, it seems to be that it could peak beyond the top here and maybe try to reach back up. I genuinely do think that this 33, 34 level makes sense to retest this zone one more time. This is where that I think the combo chart was accumulating for the most part. It makes the most sense to me. It is much lower than some previous estimates, but it's also shifted down. This is not that different. But then ultimately, I think that 1960 is kind of like the level to beat. If we don't get above this $12 area, we're not in the previous range. If we drop back through that, we're in trouble, right? So like, all the rest of this is just nonsense. Like, it's just me talking about stuff. This motion right here would be very specific. It is what it is on its chart, and I'm not going to make excuses for that. It is what it is on this chart. But ultimately, like, there's really no way to know if that is where the peak's going to be or not. And I also have not said that GameStop can't run farther. I don't think I've ever said that. So I'm not sure where you're getting that from. I've got it sitting here and pushing up, but like that's it. We haven't talked about anything else. You know, if it's at a low in November and then it pops, well, does that mean it's going to come back down? Maybe. If it does the same thing it did last time, it's probably going to consolidate here for a bit, but it could squeeze. There's just not a one size fits all here. Like you can look at that and say that, well, after it does that, it's going to drop. It's over. Okay. Maybe it doesn't even go that high. I think it's only going to go to 35 and then drop. It's over. Okay. Well, those are all completely different outcomes, right? And we can kind of brainstorm them, but I haven't really talked about any other outcome here, like beyond just this early move. So it's entirely possible that if this holds, pretty high, this could go again, like basically right after December earnings, potentially. Like, I don't see why not. There might be like a micro, we call it like a micro iteration, where it's like trying to kind of come back through. And I could see that where it has like another nosedive, but it wouldn't surprise me if this does have another move built into it somehow. GameStop's not usually this way. I don't know how to describe it, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, but I've also not really talked about any other options here, This is just a potential intersection point. It's where I see it right now. In the future, if this were to go up even double that, you're talking about all-time highs again, right? Back to 121. All right, it was just numbers. None of it's personal. I know you guys don't think it's personal, but it's just numbers. Right now, if this has to breach this level here around 8 to 12 in order to advance anyways. If it doesn't go there, it doesn't go there. During this section in the middle here, we've really only talked about a couple different possibilities for outcomes. We really haven't talked that much about other possibilities. And at least today, we really were just trying to focus on creating like a big wave. And I think we did it. I'm not going to, again, sit here and, make a bajillion different arguments for the chart beyond what I have. But this falls in line with everything, and I feel like that's pretty good. I mean, there's a synchronicity to it that works very well. And it shouldn't work at all if it's not kind of there. So I don't feel like it's way, way off. I'm not calling for moonshots. I'm basically just saying that 19 is kind of the top. I mean, may extend beyond there quite a bit, but yeah, I don't know if you can make an argument that it goes way beyond. And really, 18 is kind of this new breakdown level if in this model, this particular model. So, or excuse me, 890 is really the breakdown model, this ledge, which is very low. So instead of it being at 45, it's at like 890. So I'm already giving it, I'm pretty much just lowballing like left and right. Yeah, if it doesn't line up with your favorite YouTuber or whatever, then I can't fix that. But the idea of like a move here does seem pretty likely. I think there's some unfortunate maybe consequences of having these drops be pretty low. but it is what it is. Relative to itself, if this only went up to like 1960, again, there's no extensions or whatever, or the extensions are very minor, like they only go up to like 40. Relative to GameStop, that's the equivalent of GameStop going back to its all-time high by that point. So I just want you to be aware of that as well. Because if this goes up and it does hit, let's say above 33, remember, like GameStop's operating on a completely different chart. And like ultimately, we haven't even done this kind of a wave on GameStop. This is very downward. It really looks like a wave that's designed to kind of break down eventually. So I don't think it's way outlandish. I think that when you look at that, it makes sense that this would come back up and retest this area. GameStop would be very different. It would have to go back to before 2020 as well. There's not really any evidence here that GameStop would have to break down or go in a downward motion. Aside from like this level here being potentially down, a lot of this stuff, I think, goes back. I mean, you can use these same angles. They're present in the beginning. There it is right there, you know. It goes back to like these early days. This is from way back. I don't know what else to say about that. I'm just saying like there's evidence here that like to retest those same levels horizontally for GameStop, that'd be making a new high even, just coming up to the top. That's like a big move. But that actually doesn't even address this angle. We don't know if there's an inclination there that needs to be addressed. We don't know. Maybe. And I've gone through that in the past. I don't know if I really want to do it right now. It's kind of a whole nother conversation for another day maybe. And I don't think this is necessarily the angle either. I think this is probably a little off. It should be slightly down. But sure. The distinction between the two being that, all right, one goes to the top of its trend, the other goes to the top of its trend, and there's very different implications there, right? This is a 1,400% move, which is humongous. And I think that looking at GameStop, it would have to be even bigger. I mean, it would be like thousands of percents, assuming it actually went there. If it just goes back to here, which is sort of the more like maybe more or less in line with what I'm saying, because I'm looking at that mark, not the peak, but that mark. And I think that matters. November. The November mark is a lot smaller, but it's still way over the top. That's like 2,700%. And that's, again, I'm just looking at an angle. I don't know if that's the right angle to use, but that's the one I'm using right now. It is pretty nice. It does look right here. I could see it. I didn't do any kind of fib stuff. So this would be like maybe a spring even. It's still like 3,000%. It's ridiculous. Yeah, there might be another one, just like on AMC, like kind of I'm using this because it's just there, but there may be another one because this has two. This has like the creek check, and then there's actually a much more broad one that seems a little more accurate. This one really is more about getting from top to bottom here after the move, but there's a bigger motion. And I think GameStop has that. I feel like I've done it before. And it's not as steep as you would expect it to be. It's still steep. Yeah, that's like super steep right there. I think that's too much. There's another one back here that rings more true to me, which is this guy, because of that breakdown. And that to me would ring a greater truth. If someone showed me the two and they said, which one do you think is more likely? I would say that what it seems to me is that the operators have devised maybe a few different ones. But like these ones especially, I'll go through November here. Like that. Yeah, these guys especially feel right to me because this is a macro, like a super macro support resistance breakdown and then returning back to it. This is actually a pretty accurate wave. The problem with this is when I talk about this stuff is that people will be like, well, then does it mean come really low? And nobody wants to accept that GameStop could come down, which I'm like, yeah, all right. Well, then I don't really have any other, way to look at this. I suppose I could do again to that November one and just suggest that the rest of this should be chalked up to like a spring. So if I go to November like this, that kind of works. This guy, that is where it breaks out in January. So I mean, it's accurate for the breakout. That's like what we were talking about on AMC, like here. This is where it breaks out in January. That's what we use as the wave. So it's possible that this was the established wave at that time. And then it broke out going into mid-January here. Interesting, though, is that we definitely, if that's the case, I would say we came back through it. The November touch is the most synchronized. It looks like we're about to touch it again. Maybe that's why we're going to hit like $20 and like take off. Maybe it's more about this trend and recapturing that. But then I would look at the top and have to say like, well, that's true. Then I'd have to also say that, well, maybe this doesn't go as high. And I still think that's accurate because if this went up above here, that's not the moonshot. It's like 200 something bucks, right? It's an extension, but it would be the same conceptually, like the same range. That seems maybe more realistic, I guess. That's 1,000%. That's like more like the 1,400% move that you see. That's 300. You may really like GameStop, but it ain't no $300 per share stock. So anything like good is great about it. Well, they have all this cash on hand. Yeah, I know, and they're profitable, but they're not in a bad spot like AMC. But they're not in terms of like what they make. Not yet. Maybe they'll announce something that really changes that. But they're a pretty small company, by comparison to a lot of others. I mean, shoot. Got Nvidia out there, not even worth that much. It's $5 trillion company. It's ridiculous, man. It's insane. Well, I don't know if I agree with that, Ignis. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't think percentage is everything here. I think what makes more sense for me as a basket is that wave correlation is consistent. This looks right. I kind of eyeballed this one, but it actually does look quite right. I think those November dates are very key. You'd be surprised, man. You never know. I would never say never with something like this. These operators have a way of making everybody feel like the stock is dead, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's not dead. Look at that. January 2026, 160. That's the wave. That's the bigger wave. That's not necessarily the one I would pick out, but it is one. It is a possibility. Probably would even use something else, but see, I wonder now, because now I wonder if this is meant to be like a middle, and this actually cuts through the middle. It's starting to make sense. Entry and exit. That's a little better than, yeah. There we go. Where it enters here, where it exits here. So this is maybe, and I'm not positive, this is maybe a more accurate way of depicting. Yeah, it could be. That's pretty close. It could be a more accurate way of depicting this, this sine wave. Although I'm doing it really bizarre. I'm like kind of cutting through the middle there. It should be going up to the top first. I don't know. Let's see what the wavelengths are. It's way off. This one's tough because it technically, it's like AMC. It has that breakdown. And I can see it visually. Like it almost looks more accurate to go here. And that, to me, looks right. You can see that visually. The up-down motion looks more correct. But that puts that angle even lower. So I don't know. Hard to say. If that were the case, this middle would have been April. I know that's wrong because I know that that's obviously not up there at that time, but maybe it's because I'm using, instead of using this marker here, I should be using this guy, not this guy. This is going to be a bit of trial and error, I think. It's way out there. What are you doing, man? Just do it. What are you doing that like that for? I don't know. It goes so far to the side that it just doesn't make sense. It goes so far down out of here. I wonder if the creek break is basically in the middle. So the first one that I had might be more accurate. I'm not sure. The angle is way up high though. But then again, maybe that just represents an extension. And then that's a 50% marker here, but to the upside. And only up to that point. It doesn't go beyond. It's pretty extreme. I don't know. I'm kind of picking and choosing, but I'm not really sure. The November dates are just so attractive as a middle. They really are. They look nice. This it just doesn't look great back here. I don't know why it doesn't look as good. I guess because it's not like that direct breakdown. So I don't know. It should make sense on a small and a big scale. I said I didn't want to do this. Now I'm doing it. I need to stop and eat. We're at 261, which is fine. We're up 4%. I don't really think it's a big deal. Not yet. We'll see if we close above 258, and then we'll see what happens in the morning. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the same thing. You really have to, it's kind of the same thing that we were running into before, which is that there's not a one size fits all. You have to sort of measure out. I mean, that is pretty close. That's why I'm confused. It looks like that's the wavelength, but that's not. It's like half. See, if I use that and I go to like the middle, that doesn't look right. I don't know. Just run into the same problems I had on AMC. It's not really easy to find the answer right away. I'd have to go through and do the map and then calculate it. The bigger waves here seem a little bit more regular. So that could be helpful, but it would take time. I'd have to go through it. Well, that kind of works, because if you think about this as like an extension over the top, this could be like an extension over the bottom. A sweep. I'm trying to identify that stretch, the one like we found on AMC that was like a here's your creek kind of thing versus the other. This is pretty darn close. That actually is really close. So, yeah. I'm double checking it, but it looks really darn close. So weirdly, that could be it. That's a strange one. I don't know if I would have used this before. I don't know, it looks kind of right. It's just bizarre. Yeah, and again, maybe we could use middles. That'd probably be more accurate as opposed to just picking a point, because if you pick the wrong point, you're in trouble. This is not necessarily the most helpful thing then. I'll leave it there for now. So let's get rid of this. Let's see what we can do here. So this is one that might be there. We can see it as a possibility. The orange. The pink, Pepto-Bismol color, is a little different because it's steeper. And I think it might represent maybe more of an extension movement. I'm not going to assume that that's correct, so I'm going to try it again. I don't want to assume anything. So let's try this again. Yeah, I don't really know where the middle is, so we'll just kind of plop another line in here. Well, maybe it's right where you expect it to be, right there, right on that little hook. And then again, it comes pretty close to the middle here, and it definitely hits it on that second move up. So that's really close. Maybe not be perfect, but it's close. So again, I don't know. I could be a little bit off on this one. I don't want to say for sure that I'm on point, but I think I'm fairly close. It does seem right. It's in the right zone. It's in the right zone. Definitely has the extension on the top and bottom, for sure. It's the same value, which is nice. And then the middle, this is probably not the middle. The middle is here. Because, ooh, that triangulates it pretty nice. Because it would have, because the, or it should have. If we get this perfect, it should triangulate it, because if it was right, then that wave would be meeting at that triangulation. That would have been a way to mark off where it was. Let me double check something. So I'm going to the middle on a wick. There we go. That's really, really tight. So that looks nice. It's a little different down bottom. And it does change the extension a little, so I'm not sure. There's probably some wiggle room. And I might have it like slightly up or down with my angle too. I could be ever so slightly off. And the whole thing comes apart. All right, it's still pretty close. So I know it's a little off here. Still a little off, even if I put it on the absolute bottom there. I'm really not trying to fudge anything. I'm just trying to look at it and see if I made a mistake earlier or if I'm making a mistake now. But that is pretty close. So yeah, now let's look at like entry exits and let's see if we can kind of estimate it. Instead of doing it over here, we're going to do it over here. So entry exit is here. And that is where it backs up. So it's either right there or it's much more compressed. It does back up to it there. Let's just go here. Don't have another one there, so I can't use it. wow. Yeah, and there's the half length. Nice. Very nice. So this is the halfway point. So the downward cycle is like twice as long easily, maybe longer, but you can see that this goes right through that November date this way. Let me check something else real quick. Yeah, right through the middle. Makes sense. Should be, because I mean, that is where the middle is. If we get the wavelength correct, it should add up neatly enough. Yeah, and then this is where, again, it's sort of like it should be hitting roughly here. Oh, it did. Sorry. I was like, well, it wouldn't it hit like right there? It should be right on of course it's going to be right on the thing because this is the way we measured it. So it should be right on the thing. Yeah, so it's right there. But then the next one, this is kind of interesting because the next one, this is where things are like debatable because you don't have, it's the same, man. It's right there. It's at September, October area. It's like the exact same problem. So on AMC, it was the same deal. It was like, it's right here. It should be like the peak move season. The wavelengths are not off. Like they're just not. Like I don't feel like they're off at all. I just did it like two different ways, and it's like the same thing. It should be in that situation where it's like getting ready to go, but it's not moving. The only explanation that I have is that silly warrant thing on GameStop. I cannot think of anything else. Or it's just not going to go, right? It's just bearish, but which I'm not convinced yet. You know, I'm just not. This to me was like the end of the year. I mean, goodness gracious, folks. That is literally like September 8th. Like, is that breakout point? But it just refused to break out. It would not get over 28. I just would not allow it to go. So instead of going up here in a continuation pattern, we're going back down to the bottom of the channel again, basically. In fact, this is the intersection of the two channels as well, right there on September 8th. So it would be a good time to check them if you really want to check them both. They check them both here, 1, 2. If they check them both here, it would go down to like 2080. That's, again, another one of those numbers. It would be right around that November thing. Right there. November. Yeah. Man. But this is weird because November isn't like a straight line. So I don't know. It's not the same as AMC there. But anyways, yeah, we're up 5% on AMC. It's at 263. It didn't go below 246. If it did by like a penny, if it hit 245, we might be in the clear. But I haven't really looked at the micro at all today. I almost don't care because unless it gets above like 290, it's still just kind of in this limbo period. I have reason to suspect it could still come back down, and I know there's other creeks and such that you can use. Maybe the more outstanding one is kind of right underneath it right now. Maybe that guy. That's still higher. I would look to see if it makes a higher high here and then see if it holds the support. It did hold this. That's good. This is just the 6 minute. I don't think it's the moving average. It doesn't look like it came below 246. Nope. It hit 246, closed at 246, and then it moved up again. I don't really want to get into iteration talk right now. The answer is going to be the same every time. If it doesn't start kind of coming back up above these parallels, specifically it has to come up here above this pocket. I've got 2 indicators set. I don't buy it until it does. Once it does, then it's like, great, we're going, I think, but it's got to get above those. And this should be like the most, like the lowest one. We've done this before and failed, so just keep in mind it doesn't always work out. Yeah, that looks like it reversed. $267, that's right where the intersection is. So that should be the place that we find support, and then if we can get above this creek here, 267 with support, it may go, because there's a at least up to the 360s area to start, because there's a good chance if it holds there, that's an operator signal that it's smart money buy in. There's other creeks. I don't want to get it too deep into this. We've already talked about them, and they're higher up, a little bit higher up. So at the end of the day, you do need to get above 320. So if I had to pick like 2 numbers, I guess to start, it'd be 267 here. And if it doesn't hold 267, or if it slides back through that, it's probably going to go down into a spring, and it's going to go low, like to 226. And you could just kind of write it off as like a pump and dump. If it goes here and holds, it may just be advancing, especially if it's making higher highs than these ledges. And there's a lot of little ledges here. There's plenty of stuff to look at. But each of these has to be kind of broken coming back out of this walk down. And then when it gets to, the reason I said 316 is kind of the next big one, or 317, is because that long term seems to have much greater implication than anything else. Like, if you look at the big picture, there's way more that's accomplished there than anywhere else in the stock. There's huge amounts of jumps and stuff there. My thought is that if it does do that, we may not see it. And I hate to be like that, but we may not, because it might be such a huge buy-in moment that we don't actually get to see it. I mean, it's kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. The rest of it is already what I've had on other charts, so. Anyways, I'm hungry. I think you guys are probably hungry too. I'm going to go eat and sign off. I'm not going to watch the stock move a penny at a time or whatever. I've given you the levels. Just really got to watch those. And I've been doing that for months now. So we got to just watch them. I don't know what else to say. The 258, I know it's weird, but like it might be that 258 is the floor. I know it seems like we've been talking about 246 a lot. I'm not positive, because this marker right here is the last marker before it jumps the bigger creek. And if you look at the way the setup runs, it's, I don't know, it's kind of like everything before then may have been like part of a sweep motion. And then that's the real support that's made. And there's another one at 267. But like this is the first support, and then this is the second support. I'm not sure which order of a priority I'd put them in, but like that 258 is a really nice number mathematically on the big picture. So it works better than 246 sometimes. It doesn't always work perfectly, but it works better than 246 sometimes. So I would consider that as a possible bottom. It looks like it held right there, pushed up. So we'll see. It definitely has a little bit of a buy-in moment right there. There's a gap, which tells me they may come back and check it. Yeah, that's like a 6-minute gap right there. I mean, if it's going, it's just going to go. But if it's just like a little gap motion, you probably come up here and check, or maybe check a new high and then come back. I'd like to see them hit, and they probably won't do it. I'd like to see them hit 258. The number of possibilities for how it travels is just like infinite, you know? You could do that outside the creek, and it could take a few extra days. You could do it over here, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. It'd be nice if they hit that. Technically, it bought off of it, so who knows? Yeah, so I would watch 271. That's a big one. That one comes back to haunt me quite a bit because it was something that I noticed over here when we went up. 271 really bugged me. I'd watch 271 in the beginning. After this, 267, 271, and then I don't even care about 280 that much. I think it'd be like 290. Those are just kind of basic levels here. But your creek, this is an early sign, but it's not the only sign. So just be mindful of that. The one that I think is more important, if I had to pick one right now, is the macro one. It does come through here, almost at an irregular angle. It's like right there. Kind of pops through these guys. I think it might. Anyways, you see these 4 tops, 1, 2, 3, 4. These kind of define roughly where that is. This goes back to all the way back to like where the gap is. So if you look at where the gap is, there's top and bottom hits. You can find that marker and then take it through the December peak, and it pops right through here. I think this is a little bit more accurate. You can see it runs parallel. I guess it's supposed to probably to these other markers. That's the reason I got those anyways. So that's the one I would look at as a very high priority break. And that does look like it's at like 280. And that's also a place where there's such high, you can see the volume. This has been in a shelf for a while. This is one I'd be cautious of sell down here. That's why I was saying earlier, like, I don't really know if there's any real reason to go super high on a sell-off. All of these are sell-offs, right? So, like, if it went a little bit above there, it could sell down. So this is a caution region as well, right here around 285 to 290. Just be cautious. That's a good place to turn around if you want to sell. If it comes above there and it holds support, the next step should be a break, I think, over the 320 mark. That's really where we get some serious traction. So you'd have to see that and then a move up here and probably hits 316 or something like that on the way back. It would hit this level around 317 and then it would go. Also a potential sell zone, but those are the 2 regions I'd look at. That's all you got to know. Those are creek jumps. Big picture creek jumps too, this one especially. And this is not anything new. Just those are just the levels I'd watch. And then until that happens, or unless that happens, I'm operating under the assumption that this could still come back down. Because I'm not going to guarantee that that's it. I think it's very possible this comes back through. All right, guys, I'm out. I got to go. I wish you all the best. I didn't finish the GameStop chart, but I got to go. Wish you all the best. Hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you later.